You are watching the Sydney Winston channel. It's creeping up. It's just gone 11 p.m. on the 24th of January 2022. It's creeping up. Today is, or this episode is a reaction to Nate Cunningham, to a Nate Cunningham hangout. A quick introduction as to who Nate Cunningham is. He is a Christian, a YouTuber, a hangout acquaintance from many, many years ago, a decade ago. I've known Nate. We were on hangouts together with other people, of course, many, many times. Nate is, how could I say this? How could we put this? Nate is fervently on the side of Jesus. The answer to everything is Jesus. I tried when I was in a room with Nate many times to try and ask him how Jesus to explain to me how he knows Jesus is alive, and he says, just read the scriptures, read the Bible, starting with Matthew. Just read the Bible. And when I asked or confronted Nate with a question like, with a statement like the Gospels were written, decades after the alleged Jesus was crucified, and he didn't seem to get that part. He says, it's like, Sydney Winston, what do you, Matthew? It's Matthew. Jesus probably dictated Matthew to Matthew, or Jesus, or Matthew was there watching Jesus do all these things so he could write them down. All this crap, right? He didn't say that, but that's his mindset. His mindset is that Matthew and Mark and Luke and John just absolutely 100% true. A true, absolutely true telling of the events of the week and before and after. Crazy stuff. Absolutely fucking crazy stuff. So, have I dillied and dallied long enough, or should we get into it? Personally, I think we should get into it. So here's Nate, and we are about to watch Nate. I don't need to be have all this light shining in my face. Nate doesn't have to be on the screen because he's going to be on the screen in 2 seconds.
Hola.
Hola!
Happy Tuesday.
Thank you.
So, when I try to schedule things, they don't usually happen. That's all I can do to make it here to my own hangout on time. Anyway, so the topic was going to be extreme religious fundamentalist atheists, but I gave that up for another topic, which was, what was it? Is evolution an empirical science or not? Um, anyway, I invited like 3 people who actually live and work and have made a living and a career out of this field of study. I think they have their credentials in microbiology, evolutionary biology, and some other something. But anyways, none of them are here, so hopefully we can continue this another day. But anyway, I want to give my thoughts. I only had a couple thoughts, and they're I think fairly simple, fairly short. And after that, we've got a new guy, Mind of a Heathen, and we're just going to have an open chat. So go to natecunningham.org/guest if you would like to join, and bring a topic, question, whatever. So this is basically the only case I wanted to make, and it's kind of like, we did a video a while ago, what the Bible says or what Christianity says versus what people say it says. And
So hold on a second. He's talking about is he's essentially saying that evolution is not empirical science. Well, he says an empirical science. I'm not sure what that actually means, but he says evolution is not empirical science. But then he adds in his title, or is it? So let's listen in.
It should be easy, but we had to address it because I think if people just read this stuff themselves instead of hearing everything third hand or second hand, a lot of confusion would immediately clear itself up. Same thing with science, right? Everyone has an opinion about creation, evolution, these type things, but a lot of it is knowledge gained second or third hand. Kind of like the...
Hey John Rapp. I am watching the chat. Good to see you. How the hell can atheists be religious fundamentalists? Yeah, well, we're talking. This is Nate. Okay, remember Nate is a apologetic. So he's a nice guy and he's very calm usually, but he's on the theology, philosophy level of Darth Dawkins. He's in terms of the apologetic. So let's find out how fundamental this guy is, Nate. I find him to be extremely fundamental. An extreme fundamentalist because of his refusal to actually have a debate on the facts. He will not debate the facts, and that annoys me.
The secondhand news reporter Mike Crispino from Saturday Night Live. I think it's an accurate representation of just how wrong we can get things sometimes. So one thing this will not turn into is creation versus evolution. Don't care. That's not what this hangout today is about. The only purpose of this hangout today, the only initial starting purpose of this hangout today is simply to say, what does science say versus what people say it says? What does evolution actually say?
What does science say versus what people actually... Hold on, I didn't understand that. Okay.
Versus evolution. Don't care. That's not what this hangout today is about. The only purpose of this hangout today, the only initial starting purpose of this hangout today is simply to say, what does science say versus what people say it says? What does evolution actually say versus what people say it says? And
hold on. What does evolution actually say versus what people say it says? I don't understand that. Nate, if you're listening, you might want to jump in here, but I don't understand what you mean by that. What evolution says and what people say it says. That's kind of weird, but let's listen on.
So to start, I really just wanted to say that as far as empirical evidence, let me set it up better. So usually the conversation will start a little ways away from that, right? The point will become clear in a minute. Where the...
Come on. Find
These
it.
brain gaps are happening too much recently.
Find it.
Is that a sign of age?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So a Christian will say something like, there's a God, and if you seek and search, you'll find. And then, the opposition of Christianity is like, well, I need empirical evidence. I need to observe, test, repeat God in a controlled environment, and then I'll believe. Well, fine. But my point is, why are you holding things to such ridiculous standards as complete and total empirical evidence when you don't hold these same standards to pretty much any other aspect of your life?
This is going to be interesting. We don't hold up to those standards. We don't need empiricism for any other aspect of life other than we only need empiricism when we want to prove God exists. Then only then do you atheists ever expect to encounter empiricism. No other part of your life do you need or encounter or even use empiricism. Really, Nate?
including evolution. I only pick on evolution because this is something that, it's like the theory of gravity. It's called a theory, but I mean, you might as well say it's absolute proof, except science won't go that far. They always leave a little room just in case. So, I mean, if someone says
What are you talking about? Science leaves a little room just in case? Just in case of what? Science doesn't leave a little room, Nate. You're not a scientist. And your understanding of science and scientists is skewed. I don't think you want to understand. You're a very smart guy, so there's no reason for you not to understand methodology, the scientific methodology. I mean, you've been through academy, right? So you know what what methodology is in terms of learning things, but you won't accept the evolution. So let's see if we can figure out why.
the theory of gravity, we're like, yeah, gravity's a thing, it's real, go jump around. So the same thing with evolution. A lot of people will put the theory of evolution. It's not absolutely certain because science, won't go that far.
Bullshit! Oh! You're gonna cause me. You're causing me to have a stroke, Nate. Who says? Where did you hear that the evolution is not absolutely certain because science won't go that far? Bullshit, Nate. Come on. Are you really think that we normal people are gonna buy that? Who are you talking to spewing this kind of crap? Oh! Note to everybody out there, when you hear something from Nate Cunningham, make sure you research what he says. Because he's just said that science stops short of proving evolution absolutely true. Just in case. Nonsense.
They'll leave a little bit of room, in case they need to make adjustments or find new evidence they need to, discern and appropriate accordingly.
Bullshit. You see? Listen to him. This is kind of baffling you with bullshit. This is what he's doing with his word salad. And he's looking you straight in the eye in the camera, looking you straight in the eye. This is the character of a Christian.
But it seems, a lot of it is just as sound, especially the way, people talk about this. It's just as sound as gravity. It might as well be a fact for all intents and purposes.
For all intents and purposes? What do you mean by all intents and purposes? For all intents and purposes? It might as well be a fact. Well, gravity might as well be a fact for all intents and purposes. Evolution might be a fact for all intents and purposes. Might as well throw in electricity. Might be a fact for all intents and purposes. Listen to the way this guy throws words around and expects you to be, oh my God, you're a leader.
Except a technicality. So I'm like, well, look, guys, why are you holding empirical evidence to God when you fully are on board with things like evolution and gravity, but even these are not 100% empirically verifiable? There are only certain...
So Nate's claiming that gravity is not 100% scientifically verifiable. Gravity is not 100% scientifically verifiable. Did you hear that? Both gravity and evolution are not absolutely 100% scientifically verifiable. This is what Nate Cunningham, this is a Protestant. It's not a Catholic. This is a Protestant. This is what he's telling you. It's a lie. It's all a lie. He cannot know stuff that I mean, he cannot really. Does he really believe what he's saying? Because if he does, then he needs to come into the Sydney Winston hangout, and we need to have a chat.
parts. So I guess if anyone else wants to jump in on that, please do. NateCunningham.org/guest. And the reason I chose the people I did, who aren't here, and we'll have to make it up later, are because these are scientists. These are scientifically minded.
Okay, Nate, I empathize with you on the trying to get people into your hangout part. It's like pulling teeth. Nah, it's harder than that.
They've made their study and career in this field. So that's basically it. Last night, I'll just recap. I'm like, well, look, my goal here is to say evolution is as good as it is, right? It's logical, it's reasonable, it's sound, it's the best natural explanation we have for why we're here and all the stuff that happened, in developing us. And so, we have what's testable, observable, repeatable in a controlled environment, so we can clearly see things evolving under a microscope ourselves in our lifetime. This meets the definition of empirical evidence. One more thing is predictive power. So, we've made a lot of predictions in the past, about past things. Like, well, based on this fossil record, we expect to see X, Y, and Z in X, Y, and Z variable. And sure enough, a lot of times this has happened. So we're like, okay, well, we have empirical evidence.
Okay. Every time it's happened, Nate, there hasn't been one fossil in a layer that it doesn't belong in. Everything is as it should be if nature evolves. Okay? That's the science. How are you going to distort it for us? Or try and distort it for us?
Evidence of evolution in our natural life, how we're observing it in real time, along with certain things that are predictable and predictive power. Therefore, these are some empirical aspects of evolution. What is not empirical aspects is when you take what you can observe and you trace it back. Now, I'm not saying this to slam evolution. I don't care. That's not what this discussion's about. I only say that to say this is using reason. It's using deductive powers and logical, sound, critical.
Did you hear that? He said deductive powers. Well, a deductive argument, it doesn't have a perfect solution. A deductive argument conclusion is a probable, or maybe, or it's deductive in that it's not 100%. That it's not 100% provable, but there's a good chance. Maybe there's a good chance. So it's very, very iffy. And if he uses deductive arguments to come to his conclusions, then right away we know that he's out of his mind. He's wrong. You cannot use deductive arguments to come to prove that your God exists. You'd have to make assumptions, and you don't want to do that now, do you?
Thinking skills to take what we observe, work backwards, and anyway, that part is a lot of assumptions. I think they're well-based, they're well-founded, they're the best humanity has, right? So don't get me wrong, I really want to stress that. But it technically does not meet the definition of empirical evidence. So that's all I'm saying. So if we're good on...
What do you mean technically it doesn't reach the level of empirical evidence? Technically? What do you mean technically it does? It makes no sense what you're saying. You're saying we have all this evidence going back all this time, but technically it's not empirical. It makes no sense what you're saying there. It's incoherent. Nate?
Done that, and people believe left and right, the whole story of evolution and, what science says about it. And, even what science doesn't say. But, people believe evolution and what science says about it, and they're not holding it to 100% empirical, verifiable evidence. So why...
Who's not holding it? Who's not holding science to 100% verifiable evidence? What are you talking about? Man Nate Cunningham speak with split tongue.
Why would you do that with, theism or theology or anything like that? That is just a little food for thought.
I'll throw my 2 cents in really quick.
All right. This is Roy Montero. And Roy Montero as well is another Christian who feels that he's at the highest level of Christianity. Um, Roy is the kind of guy who says, "Listen, if there's something that you don't know and you don't know about Jesus, then you should ask somebody who knows about Jesus. And I'm the guy who knows about Jesus. I'm Roy Montero. I know everything there is to know about Jesus. Ask me, and I will tell you exactly what you need to know about Jesus, because Jesus absolutely does exist. There's no doubt about it. Blah 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 blah." But Roy's a nice guy. He's actually a I would call him a close personal friend, although we very seldom speak. But I still would, we are we've had social media interaction on a personal level. I've met his I've met some of his family on social media, so I call Roy a friend.
Quick,
Yes, sir.
so people understand where I'm coming from on this, and many people hold this as well, is that, the origin of how I got here as a human being. I mean, that's important to me. I want to know if my ancestor is, a monkey or a rat, or if it's Adam and Eve, for me personally, so I can pass that on to my kids. So, evolution in and of itself, when it attempts to tell us who my ancestor is, I mean, if evolution is speaking for Roy Montero, it's faith-based. It's not fact-based. It's a belief. And just listen to some of the people out there.
Evolution is a belief, according to Roy Montero, a belief, just like religion, just like his Jesus, just a belief, just like evolution, just a belief, just like gravity is just a belief, blah 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 blah. Science, just a belief.
I mean, the Dawkins of the world or anybody like that. It's like, if you don't believe in evolution, if you don't believe in this, or if you don't believe in that, it's like, well, it's a belief. They're saying believe. Do you believe in evolution? Anyway, faith-based, not fact-based. That's my 2 cents. Nate.
Yeah.
So he's saying so Roy Montero is saying that belief in evolution is faith based and not fact based. This is what Roy Montero said. But just a little bit before, Nate said that evolution is a fact for all intents and purposes, just like gravity for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, and I can get behind that as far as what I said. Like, there are certain facts, and coincidentally, the facts, when you know the facts that are empirical, testable, repeatable, verifiable, then the facts they shouldn't give any theist any pause, any night terrors, any problems, because the facts are just that. They're very simple, very foundational building blocks of which all these other assertions are piled on top of. Again, don't get me wrong, well-founded, good, reasonable case, reasonable assertions. Nonetheless, they are not all facts and verifiable. And that's really my only point. So I guess let's go ahead and bring some people on board. And yeah, do not turn this into a creation versus evolution. That is not the point of this. What's up, guys? Mind of a Heathen, have you anything to say? Say you're the new kid on the block. You got to unmute Control D. Or not. Sokka?
Um, I've said it before, like going into these hangouts, is that yeah, I accept evolution as the best possible explanation to explain the diversity of life on Earth. I have a pretty good understanding of what the theory actually talks about, and I find these arguments really
Okay, I'll
sometimes
forgive your typo.
just weird. I mean, like, evolution doesn't need defending. It doesn't need defending by me or anything. The thing is that, the evolutionary model is based on fact, in the sense that they have all these observable evidence, whether it's fossils, or through DNA or whatever, and they take these things and they've formed a model that has changed quite a bit over the since Darwin first proposed it. I mean, we have a much better understanding of it now. But the thing is, the model works. The model works to explain things. There's nothing that we see from the evolutionary model with the stuff that we actually observe out there that doesn't fit. And I don't understand why it's such a huge deal, because you said yourself, I mean, like, a large majority of theists out there do accept evolution, do accept old Earth, and it does nothing to shake their faith. And so, why it's such a hot button topic sometimes, I just don't even know.
That's a good question. Well,
Hey, yeah,
Soccer?
mind of heathen. You got your mic issues?
Yeah, my bad. But as I was trying to say, thank you for not making it creationism versus evolutionism, because if you got to like Cunningham style stuff, then I'd just be done with that. But the fact of it, or the very definition of scientific theory is just like it's like the best known explanation of the natural world that's been tested over and over again. And to say it's completely pure, like empirical science, like absolutely no way to be refuted, of course that would be like an absurd claim. But you can say that about just about anything, really. I mean, even in like another example, like be the U.S. court systems. Like, we could provide all these evidence against someone to indict them, convict them of a crime, whatever. But the jury can make mistakes and they can be wrong, but based on the known evidence, they can make the best known decision they can to convict the person. Much like evolution, they take the repeated observations,
He's comparing the evolution to his country's legal system. I think you know that when they start to compare apples to oranges without knowing it, that they're actually slipping on a banana peel.
test of whatever they can test. I mean, obviously, you have those people that say, "Oh, you weren't there," but they take what they do have and they test it the best of their abilities, and they come up with the theory of evolution.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I guess it's a good reason, because just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. But the bar is set really high for the scientific method. I mean, testable, observable, repeatable in a controlled environment. It's so high, in fact, that there are very few things that can truly meet that definition, including evolution. But like my friend Becky said yesterday, people that want to try to say I'm adding this. People that want to say they only live their lives by empirical evidence. You're either stupid or a liar. I'll be gracious and say you're stupid. Because you don't, right? Like, Becky brought up the point. She's like, what about airplanes? You don't empirically verify airplanes. You got a formula that works, and we can apply it across the board, but we don't empirically test, observe, and repeat every experiment we can on an airplane to make sure every airplane is individually going to fly. We have formulas that work, but technically they are not empirically tested on every plane. Anyway, now that
they're not empirically tested on every plane. So what Nate seems to be claiming is that you got your little formula that works, right? So you make your plane, and then you ship your plane to the end user without testing it. You don't have to test it because you've put all the engineering into it that works, so you don't have to test it. Well, that is patently wrong, Nate. Every single plane that is built by a plane company and is sold to an end user is tested. Does it fly? Is there a problem when it flies? Whatever it is, make sure that everything works. That's called testing, Nate. Where do you get these crazy ideas that nobody tests fucking planes?
that Becky is here, I would like to, I guess ask you guys for a little patience because I really want to have a kind of one-on-one with her. If you have anything that you're just dying to say, type it in chat. But I want to, talk to her as much as I can one-on-one while we have her here. Becky, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good.
Great. So, yeah, let me just...
Hello.
Huh? Well, yeah, let me recap real quick. So all we've gotten to so far is last night, the first point about how, look, I'm not trying to fight evolution. I'm not making this creation versus evolution debate. I'm simply wanting, people who, are into this, whose area of expertise this is, whose field they work in, who just happen to be a person who's an enthusiast, for whatever reason, people who can verify, have references, have resources that really are well-founded in knowing what the crap they're talking about. And you are such a person. Anyway, so yeah, we're basically getting like, look, evolution, there are certain things, predictive power, if you can predict something.
And he misunderstands aero engineering. 100% true. He doesn't understand nothing. He doesn't understand a damn thing. But the thing is, with his background, and I don't want to give it away, but with his background, I just expect a lot more logic and reason and critical thinking. I expect a lot more skepticism from a person with his background, honestly. But let's carry on.
Thing, this is like the trump card, like being able to say, based on A, B, and C, we predict X, Y, and Z, and when that happens, you're like, well, yeah, that's like the trump card. That's great. And then we have, testable, observable, repeatable things under controlled conditions in our lifetime we can observe right now in real time. That's about the extent of the empirical evidence. I mean, it's pretty substantial, but whenever we fill in all the gaps, we're taking what we know based on fact, and we're running backwards in time, saying, well, this is true here and now, therefore this must be true back then, which is fine. This is critical thinking. This is using logic and reason and rationality, but it technically is not 100% empirical evidence.
To which I say, bullshit. It absolutely is. If it all works and clicks together, going back, it is empirical. Because when you go back, you're not going back. Certainly in nature, when you're using evidence and you're presenting evidence, or you're looking for evidence of past history, you have to find something that fits together, that makes the puzzle look believable, that looks scientifically sound, peer-reviewed and everything. There's empirical evidence in your research. There has to be. So what the fuck, Nate, are you talking about? I'm just pointing out that you are making absolutely no sense. You're making these incoherent claims. You look very, it looks very convincing, but when I strip away what you say, layer after layer, I get to nothing. You're saying nothing.
You're taking empirical evidence and you're applying it backwards, but you're not actually doing it backwards because we don't.
So you're taking empirical evidence and you're applying it backwards, but you're not doing it backwards. This is what he's saying. This is what a typical Christian would think. A typical Protestant would think.
I don't have a time machine. I'm working on it. Anyway, so is that a true or false statement, Becky?
That is a true statement. We
Would you
do
like
have
to-
a sort of time machine.
Would you like to expound on what I said a little bit in your own words, or maybe to make more
Right.
sense of it?
No, I'm fine with what you said. But
Okay.
I was going to say that we do sort of have a time machine.
Oh yeah?
In DNA
DNA.
and in the fossil record. And it works because, as you said, we gather empirical evidence from various different sources. We start by observing the nature around us. We see how volcanoes work. We have earthquakes. We see all of these things that cause the Earth to work the way it does. And we have no reason to believe that things worked any differently in the past. As a matter of fact, when we do look at the past, we see patterns that mirror what we see today, right? And you can look at, we can look at old earthquake faults, we can look at old volcanoes, and we can look at old layers of sediment, and we go, wow, this is exactly the same as it was back then. And to give you an example of just an interesting one, we have a old retired dead volcano here in California. It's about 23 million years old, and it half of it is not too far away from me, and the other half of it is a couple hundred miles south. Now, the reason that it's in two halves is because it was on the San Andreas Fault. And so one half of the fault, we understand how fault movement works. There's been a lot of work done on it. We're, now that we have satellites, we can actually measure the movement of the faults. It's cool. We can measure the growth of mountains. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting better. So we can look at this and we can go, whoa, this is the same volcano. You can test the rock. You can see it's a volcano. You can see that it's got the San Andreas Fault running through the middle of it. And you know how fast the fault moves. Now, there are going to be little leaps and jumps because we see little leaps and jumps. We can also see them in the rock. And again, you make assumptions. We go, well, we can see these little leaps and jumps today, and what happens is this. So if we see evidence of that in the rock, we go, well, it must have happened the same way because we have no other explanation. We go with the best evidence we have and the best explanation for the evidence we have. And that's all science is. There's no real proofs, like, no absolutes, no truths. Facts stand for as long as they stand. The facts can be overthrown. They have been before. But yeah, so we look at this and we go, well, the volcano, if we look at how the fault moves, we'll go, well, gee, that volcano looks like the fault moves so fast and it's like 23 million years old. But we can also, because it's a volcano and volcano spews out igneous rock, we can also date the igneous rock. So we use our dating methods to date the igneous rock, and the dating methods go, wow, volcano's about 20.
What up, Sydney says Assembly of God. Hey, how you doing? Welcome to Nate Cunningham's retro stream. What we're trying to prove, what Nate Cunningham is trying to show us, is that evolution is not 100% proven by science, because science never says anything's 100% because of they need to give themselves a little bit of space, is what Nate claims regarding science. So Nate has been throwing lies out one by one at us, and now I think Becky's coming in. I'm not sure who Becky is, but she seems to be she seems to know her stuff so far. She hasn't spoken for a long time, so let's let her carry on.
3 million years old. Cool. They both work. We have two completely different methods that verify each other. We know how fast the fault moves. We know how radiometric dating works. So we can say with a high degree of certainty that this volcano was
Assembly of God, that's Becky. That's all I know.
23 million years old.
Right, and so a lot of the things you're saying, I'm just sitting here like, yep, because what you're saying is no-brainers. You're like, look, we can observe this, we can see rocks, we can see all these things, and you just look at it and you're like, man, this is no-brainer. This is the way it is, right? However, it does not technically qualify as empirical evidence. So, right, I have to make this clear because I'm not saying...
That's the third time Nate has said that, maybe more, but he said it doesn't technically qualify as empirical evidence. He's harped on this nonsense the whole show. That seems to be what his ground. It's like an axiom. It's not empirical evidence, even though it's empirical evidence. It's not empirical evidence. It's empirical. You see, it's weird. He's weird. It's just weird.
Because it's not empirical, it's crap. I'm saying this is stuff we accept every day as part of our lives because it is no-brainer. Like it's stating the obvious. And even that, we don't require it to be empirical evidence to be like, oh yeah, this is, I mean, this might as well be a fact. For all intents and purposes and everything this has to do with my life, it's a fact, but technically I can't say it's empirically verified.
Got hung.
Huh?
Oh no, the picture got hung for a minute. Yeah, it's not 100% empirical evidence, but it's based on empirical evidence because we can measure the fault.
Exactly.
And we know how volcanoes work. And
Exactly.
we've tested radiometric dating in the lab.
Mm-hmm.
So we take all this empirical evidence and we apply it to the situation we have. And the end result is it works. We make predictions. We make predictions that the fault has continued to creep at a certain rate, barring a few little jumps, but they're pretty small. Well, you know.
Assembly of God. Well, people put their trust in scientists. Who checks the scientists? Well, who do you think checks the scientists? I'll give you a hint. Okay. How about let's see what. Okay, this is who checks the scientists. Okay. Other scientists. Got it. Other scientists check the scientists. When a scientist brings forth a theory, other scientists check the theory. When a scientist brings forth a proof of a theory, other scientists check the proof of the theory by trying to duplicate the method that brought them to the conclusion from the data provided. It's not very difficult, Assembly of God. It's just not. So,
You know, in historical time, they're pretty small. If you're next to one, I was here during the Loma Prieta earthquake, so yeah, when you're there, it's a bit more than small. But we've got this empirical evidence, and we say, so we're going to go back in time, and we're going to say it's always moved pretty much the same way. And when we examine the rocks, it looks like, yeah, it's always moved the same way. So we have that empirical evidence. We have the radiometric dating, which we know works because we can test it in the lab, and we know how volcanoes work. We put all these things together, and we come with two separate calculations that verify each other. So we go, yeah, 23 million years old.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's not 100% measurable. No, but the conclusions come from empirical evidence, but the conclusions themselves are not. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, so that is an example of what science and evolution in this case, and I guess geology for the part you brought in. This is what these things actually say, and what they do not say is, oh, everything with evolution, everything with geology, everything with this is absolutely empirically verified. That's stupid. Please stop saying that, or you'll be in the category with, you know, your fundy counterparts, as people would call them. So, you know, my ultimate point of this is, look, everything in your life is not nearly empirically verified the way you think or hope or want it to be, but it still works. Life works. These things are logically deduced. They're reasonable conclusions, and they work really darn well. So that's fine and great. But stop demanding empirical evidence for God and whatever else you're demanding empirical evidence for. Of course we would want it. We would aspire for this. But in lieu of it, and you know, taking into consideration how many things are unempirically verifiable, if that's the right word, TM on that. Yeah. Anyway, so I do have one more question, and then we can wrap it up and let other people chat.
I did want to say one thing.
Sure.
One of the problems we have is with language. So if when someone asks for empirical verification, ask what they mean by that. Because they could mean assumptions based on empirical verification, which is something completely different. The 23 million-year-old volcano is assumptions made on empirical verification. Okay. Language trips us up so much.
So now I have a question. This is really going to show my ignorance, but I'm a truth seeker, right? So who cares? Right. So, you know, if this is something you don't want to deal with, or it'll take, you know, longer than the day is long, let me know. But so I was talking to Fiona a bit last night, and I was really interested, right? Because we got on the common descent for a little bit, and I'm like, well, why is it that it's either or? Either you have some Christians saying the Earth is 6,000 years old and God did everything, or you go to the other end of the scale, which is the Earth is billions of years old, and we all came from the same event, from the same aerobigenesis event,
Right.
Everything came from it. And I'm like, well, Fiona, why is it always these two extremes? Why is there nothing in the middle? Like, well, maybe something got here through transpermeation. Maybe something got here from the Miller experiment, lightning striking stuff. Maybe God did it. Maybe there is a million or hundreds of thousands of different.
How can you possibly say that maybe God did it? Maybe panspermia, maybe something scientific, maybe something else scientific, maybe God did it. I mean, how do these people get away with putting their God did it on the same possibility level as physics did it, chemistry did it? That's it. Nothing else did it but just nature. Nature did it. Why do they have to go looking for answers outside of nature which cannot possibly exist? Because outside of nature is irrational, incoherent. It's an impossibility. There's nothing outside of nature. There is no. It's even inconceivable to think of outside of the physical, outside of reality. It's I can't think. It's easy for me to think of, $1 trillion and how much money that is, or 100 trillion miles, light years even. I can think of that. I can sort of conceptualize 100,000 light years and what it means. But how these people do it, I just don't know.
Abiogenesis events, and her answer, and I'm making my question.
But to maybe God did it as a possibility is it's out of the question for me as a rational human being to accept that possibility, because it is not a possibility. God is not a possibility. God is impossible. So to say maybe God did it is lying. Is lying. It's just a cop running away. Basic. Maybe God did. Running away from the question. If that's all you can come up with, then you're not very good at critical thinking. If Jesus is your answer, you're not a critical thinker.
Her answer was, well, because we see so many similarities that's the best assumption. And I thought, okay. And then we discussed it a little bit more, and the deeper we went, this is my question. Am I completely wrong? And I'd like to think I'm not, because I asked her this.
I'll say you're completely wrong, and I'll also say to Assembly of God, all gods are imaginary. There is no supernatural. Jesus is a myth. Reality exists in the form of energy and gravity and matter. There is no supernatural. That is just a concoction of mankind. And I'll prove to you why I know you're lying when you say there is a supernatural in a moment. But I want to let Nate get his point across first. And to tell me that I do not understand the supernatural is a crazy thing to say. Because you don't understand the supernatural either, because there is no supernatural. So, yes, I do not understand the supernatural, because there is no supernatural. Therefore, you, Assembly of God, do not understand the supernatural either. Because there is no supernatural. It doesn't exist. Just like your God doesn't exist. Just like everybody's God doesn't exist, other than in your imagination.
A lot of times just to try to make sure I wasn't. But anyways, in the event, it seems like she basically said that at the cellular level, the individual cell, they're essentially exactly the same. So the only thing that distinguishes plants from animals, from trees, from tadpoles, from me, is because we have multiple cells, we have lots and lots of cells, and the different way they're arranged and manipulated and markers turned on and off, and that's the only reason. So if you break all this down, Like if you tear down, you, me, Roy, my dog over there, my cat somewhere, and you basically take all the individual cells. There's no way you can say, well, that's from a cat, that's from a dog, that's from a person. You're like, oh, well, this constitutes as life, or a living cell, this is a living cell, this is a living cell, and they look exactly the same. So my thought was, okay, the common descent is okay, because if there's so many similarities, that makes sense. But when we get to the individual cell, maybe there's so many similarities because the only way life can exist.
Assembly of God. Calling Assembly of God. Jesus is a myth. All gods are imaginary. It says it there on the screen. And if you have to question it, then I have to question your evidence that you bring to me for anything as well. All right, I'm allowed to question it. So all gods are imaginary. I tell you what, prove me wrong. I invite you to prove me wrong. There is no Jesus, there is no God, there is no Moses, and there is no prophet Elijah up in heaven. None of this is true. None of it. So prove me wrong. But you can't.
Exist is in this individual form. So that makes me think it's completely plausible that there could be any untold number of abiogenesis events, God, lightning, transpermeation, maybe the Miller experiment happened on Mars and that's why we have moths from a comet. I just think there's lots of scenarios, because if we ever find like aliens in a galaxy far away and we share all kinds of similarities, clearly we did not come from the same event. But if we're all traced back our individual cells and they look exactly the same, well, it's because that's the only way life can exist, is looking in this exact little pinpoint. Okay.
So what is he saying? He's saying that life in the cellular, I guess at the cellular level, looks the same. That could be true. But what we do know for 100% for sure is that at the subatomic level, everything looks the same. There's no difference. At the quantum level, it's all vibration, all the time, never ending, never beginning. It's vibration. It is the energy, and energy is vibration. Vibration is energy. That is reality. That's existence. That is eternal, and that is an axiom. Existence is eternal. All gods are imaginary. Existence is eternal. Now, once you've got that straight, you can actually say to yourself, well, if existence is eternal and you accept it because it's the only solution, it's the only answer that makes sense, nothing else, everything else is incoherent, then you can just drop your God, because your God is not needed, because your God is a creator, right? And you do not need a creator when there's nothing to create, because reality, existence, is eternal. Because there is no other possible state. Simple. But I would like Nate to get it.
So now my question, is that semi-right, completely right, or completely batcrap wrong?
Well, there may have been more than one initial event in terms of abiogenesis. We don't know. The problem is we would have to have an explanation for more than, you're saying that's the only way life can exist.
Look, I'm going to answer ass of God tells me that I don't know quantum mechanics. I never claimed to know quantum mechanics, but I know the rudiments, the fundamentals of quantum mechanics. Do you know the fundamentals of quantum mechanics, Ass? of God. I'm asking you, as of God. Do you? Answer me. Answer me, boy.
When you look at it on the genetic level, when you look at it at the cellular level, when you look at the lipids being put together, it would be hard to understand how it could, at some later date. I mean, there may have been like a pool or something. We're still not clear, like a biogenesis. There's a lot of questions that started alive. It could have, we have found amino acids in meteors and things like that look like the ones here on Earth. So that's kind of like where people go, well, maybe it came from meteors. We don't know, but we're just, is you go backwards and you can see how this changed to this and this changed to this and this changed to this, and you can see it on the genetic level. Now we're still in our infancy with that, really, and part of the reason is because up until recently it was incredibly expensive and time consuming to do a DNA, especially entire genome DNA. Like when you go into a court of law and they say, oh well, we have this guy's DNA. They didn't do his entire genome to compare it to the entire genome of the DNA that was left, because that's way too time consuming. They just apply it to certain markers, and that's how they do it. So, but there's a huge, the best way to do it, it's easier for me to look at it from the point of view of eukaryotes. There are prokaryote cells, which are the original cells. They're real simple. And those are the progenitors of life, and they're very, very simple. And bacteria are prokaryotes. And bacteria are kind of confusing because they kind of sort of share DNAs now and then. And so to understand bacteria, you'd have to really talk to a bacteriologist, because it's very confusing to me. But then
It kind of sounds to me like Becky's proving evolution. It sounds to me, and Roy Montero's still in there. So I'm wondering, I'm actually very, very interested, curious as to how this is going to turn out.
you go into the eukaryotes, and that's where I can speak more of it. Prokaryotes became eukaryotes basically by absorbing other prokaryotes. We actually have kind of examples like that. For instance, we have certain protozoans. Volvox is one, Paramecium also, that will take algae in them. And the algae are a separate creature. The Paramecium are a separate creature, but they have algae in them. So there's two separate creatures living together, and they live in this commensal environment. What's interesting is this particular kind of algae looks just exactly like chloroplasts. So when we look at plants, we go, well, this is where the chloroplast came from. This is where the organelles in the eukaryote cell, which is a more complicated cell, they came from. The ancestral protozoans absorbed these other protozoans and didn't eat them. And we have examples, I'm not going to go through it, but we actually have examples of like stages down the line, and we see this. And our mitochondria look exactly like bacteria. So we see how the eukaryotic cell was built. So when we look at our DNA, there's like a big chunk of our DNA that defines us as eukaryotic cells. And eukaryotes are animals, plants, and fungi. So that entire chunk of DNA is exactly the same, minus maybe a couple of little things here and there. It's exactly the same. It defines us as eukaryotic cell. So what you have to ask is, how on earth could this complex eukaryotic cell, all this information that tells you that this is a eukaryotic cell, how could that ever rise more than once? Or if it did rise, I mean, we more than once, obviously somewhere along the line, somebody took precedence. Some ancestral life forms took precedence. Now, as I mentioned, bacteria kind of swap DNA, so we may have had more than one prokaryotic progenitor. They ended up combining in some sort of way. I'm vague on prokaryotes. But once you get to eukaryote, it's like, I don't see how you could, how you could have more than one genesis for eukaryotes, so to speak. We're just so alike. And then as you move down the line, as you go from eukaryotes to like animals and plants and fungi, then there's a big chunk of our DNA that says animal. And that's all alike. And then you go further to vertebrate, to mammal, to primate, to humans and so on. But it's at that eukaryotic stage, which is the one I understand better. I don't see how you could have more than one genesis for that. I just don't.
So what I heard is...
you'd have to come up with a mechanism that actually worked, that said, we have two different genesis events that created the exact same thing. And, I mean, it just for a simply, for a non... Maybe somebody comes up with one. But as it is now, science goes with the best explanation available. All the evidence says, yeah, they're all alike. How could it come from more than one genesis event?
So what I heard was plausible, right?
It is plausible, not probable.
Good
Remember,
enough. Hey, I'm really happy that after my short conversation, I was able to wrap my head around it enough to come up with that. So I will take that. Well, hey, I guess if you have anything else to cap off with or insert another topic, I guess I've got my questions answered. Now we can just chit chat and bring the other people in. Is anything else you'd like to say, Becky? First.
No, except that people need to remember that on both sides, because it drives me crazy, that science isn't etched in stone. The only actual proofs out there, the absolute kind of proof, truth, or whatever you want to call it, is in math. Everything in science is tentative, and everyone agrees that. But what we do is we say certain things are facts because they stand. They stand again and again and again. And when you're talking about scientific theories, you have to be careful. It's a scientific theory, like the scientific theory of evolution, the scientific theory of gravity, the scientific theory of the germ theory of disease, which is scientific theory. These things are actually higher than facts because they're built on facts. They're built on a multitude of facts. And as of yet, we have seen nothing that threatens the biological theory of evolution. Everything that comes out just supports it. That doesn't mean it won't change.
Hey, ass of God. I appreciate you doing all that typing and stuff, but I'm waiting for you to say something intelligent so that I can, give you the time of day to answer. Or the alternative is for you to come into the live hangout or the hangout itself once I publish the link. So stick around. You will have your day. And just say.
We still don't really understand gravity. That doesn't mean that we deny it. We don't understand every little tiny bit of evolution. And as more information has been coming in from DNA, from our studies in genetics, it's just really cool because I subscribe to all these different science things, and it's really exciting because everything just keeps adding more to the theory of evolution. It just keeps confirming it. That's all I want to say.
Hey, Becky. Hey, first of all, hey, girl. I mean, I met you the other day over in Heath's room, so hi, fellow Californian.
Yes,
and I got a quick question to address really quick here. So I've also heard the term creation science, and so from the other camp, the other side, there's also a science to it. I wonder if you can address that a little bit and actually let me know what is meant by creation science.
I wish I knew.
I'm pretty sure I have an accurate answer from someone of the well, I guess the opposing side.
Yeah.
It would probably go something like, it's faux science, it's not scientifically valid and founded. That's the answer. That's not my answer necessarily, but I'm pretty sure that's an accurate answer from someone on the other side. If anyone agrees or disagrees, speak now. I'm pretty sure that's a correct answer you would get from someone on that camp. But I wanted to say,
The thing is, I mean, when you talk about creation science, is that, like I said, is when you're just talking about, like I said, evolution before earlier, is that you are looking at, you know, a series of facts that you're building a model around. That the model has explanation powers for the facts that you do have. I mean, that's how you form a theory. With creation science, there's no such thing. I mean, you cannot build a model. You'll never be able to. If God did create everything, do you think that you can build a model, explain the mechanics of how God did create? And you wouldn't be able to. It would be impossible. So so what possible models and explanations can you possibly get from creation science? And that's why it's kind of frowned upon, because there is no ability within creation science to actually explain anything.
Hey, welcome, Fiona. And a lot of, and I think really Becky alluded to it earlier. She said something like, science is subject to change. I would go one step further and say, in lieu of certain evidence, whatever the case may be, withhold judgment. Don't just say science is crap because they haven't like absolutely declared gravity's a thing. I mean, go jump around, test it yourself. But yeah, so always keep in the back of your mind this stuff can change. Like I'm whenever I first heard the Earth was the universe is like 14 something billion years old, I always, like, since I was a kid, I knew that, and I'm like, oh, that's fine. I'm like, I'll tentatively accept that because that's the best we have, but I'm not dogmatically clinging to it. Like, it's not going to shake any part of my life if I find out it's wrong. A couple years ago, turns out, to the best explanation we have, we missed it by a billion 0.1 years here and there, and now I think it's like 15.1 billion years old. And that's fine. It's subject to change. So I think a lot of times when people are like, well, there is no God, there is no proof for God, therefore I dogmatically make up my mind here and now, there is no God. Give us 100 years. Maybe we'll empirically be able to prove God. I mean, just in lieu of certain, even in the faith.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Give us 100 years. Maybe we can prove God. Stalling. Just not facing up to the facts. The facts are there is no God. You know that, Nate. Everybody in that room knows that. So stop pushing Jesus, because Jesus is a myth. Jesus doesn't exist. I know it's not going to stop you, but I had to say it, Nate.
Face of certainty. I think it's just good wisdom to always keep in the back of your mind things could change, in the interest of never saying never. Like the theory of gravity, it's probably never going to change. It's probably going to be a thing as long as humanity exists. But I guess something could happen to, I don't know, reverse it, or aliens could shoot us with a beam or something. I realize that's really facetious, but I think, there's a nugget there to keep an open mind. How is a Christian the one encouraging people to keep an open mind? Anyways, so do that. Fiona, I don't know if you want to jump in anything, our topic yesterday, or we just finished up today the two questions with Becky. The evolution is not 100% verifiable. It's completely logical. It's sound. It's deduced through reason and critical thinking. It falls in line with what works and how life is lived in other aspects of life, but it does not, in every case, meet 100% the burden of empirical evidence. And then we recapped the, why do people always talk about, well, either God did it exclusively or it's all evolution from one event. We covered the different commonalities and things like that. And anyway, so we basically recapped everything last night. Do you want to jump in and say anything? Are you still feeling ill?
Yeah,
Are you better?
I'll just say that what you were saying about science and science being tentative and that it's subject to change. And the best example I can give of that is the one that you were talking about, the age of the Earth. And that when we find the oldest rock that we have dated, all we can say about that is that the Earth would be at least as old as that oldest rock. What we are unable to say is that there aren't even older rocks that we just haven't found yet. So we always bear that in mind. And that's why science is tentative. And I think that's a good thing for it to be. So when they give you the age of the Earth, they are saying at least this old. but they're not ruling out the possibility that there are older rocks they just haven't found. I think that's a good example to give to demonstrate why science has got to be tentative.
Exactly, Bulldog. I totally agree with you. Fine-tuning has been debunked, 100%. So for them to even go there and to even harp on maybe God did it, that's the most arrogant statement I've ever heard in my life. Maybe God did it. That's assuming a lot of things. That's making some serious presumptions, presuppositions.
Yeah, and I wish people would see it more like that, right? Because, I mean, gosh, you've got a Christian like screaming in defense of science, and everything you're saying, I'm just like gobbling up, like feed me more. Like this is stuff I've learned about science since I was a kid in school, right in the Bible Belt, Midwest, religious zealousy, right? These are basic scientific principles I've learned, and they've served me well, carrying them throughout my life. So when again, I wish I would have brought the meme out sooner, but I saw a meme recently. It's like if I'm going to get it wrong, but paraphrasing, it's something like if you think science threatens your religion, you don't understand either. And I really think that's it, right? Because science is so like easygoing. It's like, look, we're simply going to follow the evidence. We're going to search. We're going to seek for the truth. We're going to follow the evidence where it leads. And when we come to a dead end, we're going to make the most logical, deduction of what we currently have. And if we're lacking, if it doesn't work,
I don't think we should make it deductions in any way whatsoever. I think everything has to be inductive in order for it to be possible. In order for it to be certain, it has to be inductive. This deductive stuff that he's throwing at you is all probability and maybes and perhaps. Either that or he doesn't know how to use the word deductive properly. Nate, you have some answering to do, my friend.
Then we're going to withhold judgment until something does. In most cases, we have a pretty darn good idea, but instead of saying, absolutely, there's my stamp, this is fact for the ages, we're like, this is the best we currently have, it works, it serves us, but something could happen to make it change at some point. If more people, Christians and atheists and whatever, would just, regardless of what you believe, if you would latch onto what science actually says versus what everyone from every side tries to say it says, it's like,
well, how do you plan to do that, Nate? If you've got to latch onto what science says rather than what people say, then how does science speak? Through what medium is science going to speak to you and me, if not through people? Throughout your show, throughout this episode, you have not made any sense when you've thrown out all these claims. Like, well, science says that gravity is a scientific fact, but they stop short of saying that it's a scientific fact because they give themselves some room, just in case, because they're scientists. This is what you said, Nate. Absolute lie, an absolute lie. Going to catch you on all of them, I'm telling you.
Here's what science says, and then here's my complete own personal agenda, and I'm extending science to say this as well. And that's just not fair. It's not reasonable. No one's gonna. Well, I mean, look at the community who does this. I mean, nothing good is coming from it. So anyway, Rob, did you want to? You had a comment a while ago, right? Did you want to weigh in on anything there?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I was just simply going to weigh in on what you said and ask Becky regarding. You're talking about the plausibility, I guess, of other factors other than evolution coming in, like lightning striking and water and things, or aliens, I guess, coming from outer space and bringing life, or a meteor hitting the Earth and that had life on it from somewhere else. And Becky was very polite in saying that it was possible but not probable, or something like that.
Plausible, not probable.
Yeah, and she was right, and probably a little nice for you, because when we talk about empirical evidence and that which we can observe or experiment, but and really observe, when we talk about procreation, when we talk about reproduction, which is the crux and key of evolution, we have experienced as a human species, sex and birth. You know, these are things that are empirical. We know that when you have sex, the end result may in fact be creation, and that's what evolution looks at. So if I'm helping you to make sense of it, I don't think it makes any sense to come up with these theories of aliens from outer space or lightning striking and take that seriously unless we have some kind of evidence of it, and we've never seen that replicated anywhere. We've never seen a moment, unless somebody can correct me, of lightning striking in a pond and then all of a sudden a single cell organism popping out that can reproduce itself. But we have seen babies born. We have seen species create new life, and that's why the theory of evolution makes sense when we view it into that construct that we have empirical knowledge of. That when you have sex, there's new creation, and so that's why the focus is on evolution. That's why evolution makes a lot of sense, because of the fact that it comes out of creation and what we can see, reproduction itself. Hopefully that helps a little bit. I didn't mean to ramble.
Good.
I'd like to say a couple things. First of all, that meme you were talking about,
Yeah.
that was basically stolen from St. Augustine. And I'm joking about stolen. But that's what St. Augustine said 1,500 years ago. Basically, if you think your religion contradicts science, you don't know either. You investigate them both. And I think that's interesting. We're 1,500 years and we still haven't gotten that. And the other thing, I just want to make clear that when we're talking about a biogenesis precedes the biological theory of evolution. Because the biological theory of evolution, and I'm being careful saying the whole thing because sometimes people go, oh, evolution can mean anything. And yeah, it can. It could mean evolution of dance. But the biological theory of evolution starts after life arises. And it doesn't deal with the biogenesis at all. It starts with when life arises. And I've had people go, well, you got to start with life arises, because if you don't have life, you don't have evolution. And the explanation I often give is, okay, so I'm going to build a house, right? I go down to the lumber yard. I don't need to know how the trees grew. I'm going to build something. I'm going to start with the lumber.
Can I just say something here, Becky? This is something that is exercising my brain quite a lot. We always make the point that evolution doesn't start until you've already got life, and evolution doesn't care how life arose. But I was talking last night when I was talking to Nate, and I was talking about the self-replicating RNA molecules. And as soon as you have imperfect self-replication, you've actually got a potential for selection there, natural selection there. And yet we wouldn't call a self-replicating molecule life. And so now the boundaries start to blur. Do you see what I mean?
Yep.
So we don't have to get a selection process happening. We don't have to have a cell, a fully functioning cell. You can be just at the self-replicating molecule. And of course that puts, we've got various viroids that are just naked RNA, and you'd be hard pressed to say that they were inanimate objects, they weren't alive, but you'd also be hard pressed to say that they fit the definition of living.
Yeah, there is a gray area there, and we see it when we look at viruses.
Mm-hmm. It's a very grey area.
Like the families you don't invite to dinner, right, Fiona?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's the member of the family that at the family get-togethers you sit behind a curtain and you don't talk about them. But it is one of those areas where we can quite happily say, it doesn't matter how life arose, evolution doesn't get started until life is there, but we can have this natural selection purely acting on these molecules, but we wouldn't call them alive, because RNA replicates more imperfectly than DNA does, so you tend to get more mistakes made. So you're going to get a population of variants, and some are going to be better.
Hello,
Hello,
Wesley.
Sydney.
Hello, Wesley.
Hi there.
Good evening.
How are you?
I am fine. How are you doing?
Glad to hear your voice.
Oh, and that's nice. How are you faring this year so far?
Well, I'll tell you what.
Well,
I would so much rather speak with somebody that just plainly says there is no God than listen to the crap and stink out of the mouths that say Jesus, 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 and are total frauds any day of the week.
thank you. Thank you. That is a huge compliment. Thank you.
At least you're plain and at least you're plain about it, you know. It's these people that say Jesus, oh, we love, and they're nothing but hate and perversion and money.
Yes.
Saying Jesus has nothing to do with it. It's all their fame, their money, and that's it. And then they when they talk about Jesus or they come on a YouTube channel and start preaching, they're preaching as though they are God. And they say they use one little verse of the Bible and then 10 minutes of their imaginative bullshit.
Yeah.
As though their words are God, and then that little verse they say means that their words are the words of the Bible, and none of their words are the words of the Bible.
Exactly.
So I would rather, just that really, really gripes my nuts. I mean, giving love for that kind of evil is one of the most difficult things I think I could ever try to do.
Right.
Big news today.
Let's hear it.
Okay. The last 3 days, Jesus turned every Book of Mormon, New King James Version, Quran, Torah, Buddha text, Krishna text, or Xbox and tarot cards to dust for about 4 minutes at a time, and then returned them worldwide. 3 times he did this 3 days. So people were in a Jewish synagogue with their 2 big scrolls, and the scrolls vanished from their hands. And 4 minutes later appeared somewhere in the synagogue. Somebody at home reading their New King James or their New International Version, or in a California church doing their 1 verse from the Bible and then 20 words of imagination, reading from a New International Version. Those Bibles vanished from their hands, ceased to exist.
So this should be all over Twitter, shouldn't it?
For about 4 minutes.
Yeah, it should be all over Twitter, and certainly should be in all the Jewish publications, because if this happened in Jewish synagogues all over the world, Jews, they're going to be talking about it. I need to look this up.
Well, they may be. There's if I would guess what little bit might be in a Jewish rabbi on YouTube wouldn't even be 1/100%.
I'm not talking about Jewish rabbi. I'm talking about people who are in synagogue and reading the book that you said disappears. They'd be talking about it if it really happened. I don't see anything on the internet yet.
Yeah, you're not going to. No one's going to say anything about it. That puts me in that predicament of the common phrase of "Are you on your meds?"
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much.
That puts me right there in that pocket every time.
Yeah.
So what's going on with you? What's with your talk tonight? What are you discussing, or what are you discovering?
I'm reacting to Nate Cunningham, who is a Christian Protestant, who says the answer to every question is Jesus. And Nate Cunningham, is actually one of the nicer people on the internet. He's a nice guy, he's not rude like Christians usually are. But he's wrong. He's just wrong in terms of the answer to every question is Jesus.
Hmm.
That's just nuts.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so much, you know. He sure gives us a lot of freedom to do a lot of things.
Who's that?
You know, our creator, Jesus. But as far as going around and, I don't know what to say about that kind of motivational speech, perhaps.
Well, what Nate Cunningham is doing is claiming that evolution is not 100% empirical because science won't make it 100% empirical. Therefore, it's not 100% proven, and that's nonsense.
Yeah. Well, I may have said it before. I believe that all these people that claim to be Christians, that not even one of them are, that they all saw Jesus and they will never tell about it, that Jesus told everybody, tell the vision and you shall heal without money. So in my heart, what that means is all of these lip service Jesus, as smooth and silky as they are and as positive and uplifting as they are a doctor that is standing next to a bed of a sick, dying child. And in that doctor's hand is the cure for that illness of that dying child. And rather than give that cure to that child, they withhold it. They hold it back by fraud, and the child dies, and the parents go into misery at their loss. That's the way my heart sees them.
Well, the doctors aren't allowed to do that. That's unethical.
Yeah. You could say it's murder.
I guess
It's like a frog head that goes around murdering by being quiet about just a few little things.
Yeah, but this is not the norm.
So that's the way my heart sees them, and I'm just frustrated as all doo-dang about it.
How are you? I got a question for you, Wesley. You're born in North America.
Yeah.
And your God is Jesus.
Yes.
How do you know that Jesus is your God? Because people born on the other side of the world have a different God.
Right.
Perhaps the same essence or whatever, but they're called with a different name and a different attributes and whatnot. And somebody born on the other side of the world would say, "Hey, yeah, I believe in God, Allah, or something, and there's no that's it. That is God." And they're convinced that is God, just like you are convinced that Jesus is God. Is that just not? Is that just not a coincidence? Not a coincidence. It's not just you just happen to be born in North America. The other guy happened to be born in the Gulf region, and you just worship the God that you were grown up to believe in, and that person in the Gulf region worships the God that he was grown up to believe in, and that's the explanation.
I guess he just blessed me. I cannot remember a time in my life when I did not know he is God.
Yeah, but why Jesus specifically, and why not Allah, or why not Yahweh?
That I can't answer that. I just have always known. I never doubted it in words. Now, my acts, the way I have acted, most of my life would say, no, that guy doesn't believe a thing about Jesus. There was years when I was a crackhead, smoking crack in the alleys of Chicago for 10 years every day.
Stop that.
And that is not, I don't. It's been decades.
It's
been a decade since I've even done that kind of thing. But in those days, my lips were saying Jesus, Jesus.
But let me ask you about being a
crackhead. As I was trying to make $20 for a crack swing.
Yeah.
So,
do you have
I was not a character that a person would look at in any way and say that guy believes that Jesus is God. That was
Yeah, but
not an
believing that Jesus
example
is
for him
God is
at
not
all.
in any way a redeeming feature because Jesus is a myth.
Well, in those years, I sort of blinded myself to the fact that he's God. But before that, I was also lucky that I was brought up in a loving and nurturing and a positive house. My parents were never divorced. We went to church on Sunday morning and on Sunday evening and on Wednesday evening. And
Ah, that's where you got Jesus from.
it wasn't an overly zealot
I
thing,
understand,
but it was
but
just natural. It was just natural and good natured. It was good neighbors, be good to them, and we were pretty fortunate in that there was not a lot of trouble that came
right,
our way,
right.
or at least not trouble that I was aware of. If there was some hanky panky going on between wives and husbands in the neighborhood,
Well,
I didn't know about it.
we're more looking at on the subject of evolution in this broadcast today. So,
Okay.
Nate
Well, that's
Cunningham,
foreign to me. I don't know anything about it. I don't believe in evolution, but I'm more than willing to hear it, to listen.
if you don't know anything about it, how do you make a decision to not believe in it?
Well, I have never read Darwin's books. The
Nor have
extent of
I.
my knowledge is from smatterings of conversation, hearing people profess it, and then I did watch sort of a semi-biography about him. I'm a big fan of biographical films and documentaries. So, I've observed those and heard what people
Well, let me
uh,
ask you a question.
gleaned from his life.
Let me ask you a question, Wes. What is evolution?
Well, I think that what is professed by those that claim evolution exists is that there was a minimal amount of life form on Earth when it was first formed from a heated blob of magma and lava that cooled,
Okay, all
and
right,
then
no
life
problem.
formed,
Yeah, I
and
hear
it
you. I hear you.
slowly grew, and over millions of
Mm-hmm.
years developed into more sophisticated uh, life forms, and then apes after the dinosaur prehistoric era, the mammalian era, and then after that the apes somehow or another through millions of years. There's something physical about them. As time progressed, they became more intelligent, and they became what we know now as modern man. From the Neanderthal and the Mesozoic periods. But I am not versed and well read about that. But that's in general what I think that they are trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
That this has been around for billions of years, and that over that time, if we went back in our 7 line back into time, we would
Mm-hmm.
find out that our million year ago grandpa was, had hair on his entire body, most of the time walked around on all four on hands and feet, and kind of oohed and odd like a apes do, or at least something similar to it. I think
Hello,
that's,
hey
in general,
JL.
that's what I get the idea that
I don't
evolutionists
know
say.
what
That mankind
I don't know what this
developed
guy's talking about, to be
slowly,
honest with you.
and we all pretty much came out of
He's
a
trying to
crab
explain
cake that was underneath
evolution.
the ocean that made its way up onto dry land.
Okay. Alrighty.
What do
So
you say? How would you describe what evolution is, Sydney?
evolution is small changes over long periods of time.
Mm-hmm. The difficulty I have with it is there is no real empirical evidence of it. You know, you can find bones.
What do you mean there's no empirical evidence of what?
Well, that it's imagination. That's that. All the evidence is imagination, and putting
All the evidence.
you've got a puzzle that's 1,000 pieces.
We're not
but
talking
you only
about
have two of the pieces of the puzzle, and you're
Wesley, we're not talking about
Okay.
Jesus. We're talking about reality. So
Right.
reality is all facts.
Yeah. Well, reality, Sydney, lest I remind you, is fish and bread 11 days before Christmas. So that's reality too. And that fish and bread didn't evolve. It took a long time to grow that wheat and
I have
reap it.
no
and sift
idea.
it
I
and-
have no idea what you're talking about
well, okay.
with this nonsense about fish and bread.
You and 12 billion people.
Yeah. Listen, what was the story that you told us about fish and bread? So many people. Everybody got certain amount of loaves and fish.
Yeah.
What was that about again?
I said the vision from Jesus, and when Hanukkah began, I asked Jesus to give every Hebrew fish and bread all the days of Hanukkah. And on the last day of Hanukkah, I asked him to give them a piece of candy in a dreidel. For all those that claim to be Christian, I asked Jesus to give fish and bread, baked bread and cooked fish, to all those claiming to be Christian for the 11 days up to Christmas. And then after Christmas, I asked Jesus to do this for all the rest of humanity, those that claim to be Muslim or Buddhist or Krishna, or have no God at all, or have deities they worship in foreign lands that I have no knowledge or have never visited.
Right.
So I sort of put it into three packages. You got the Hebrews, and then the Christians, and then the rest of them. And I asked Jesus to give everybody a fish and bread on earth for those days. And if they said, "Thank you, Jesus," they could eat it. But if they wouldn't say thank you, they couldn't eat at that table. And then if they were just not going to say thank you, I asked them to give them a piece of candy that they didn't have to, they didn't have to do, they get a free piece of candy. You want something for nothing, here you go, have a sweet kid. That's what I asked Jesus to do. Whether he did it,
I'm still trying to
I do not know.
I'm still trying to understand.
I do not know, because
Why?
nobody witnessed. Nobody, if that happened, I don't know. I didn't see any vision of it happening. No one ever came up to me and told me it happened.
I want to know.
A couple of people, when I mentioned it in a public area, would nod their head yes, but never a person that would introduce themselves to me, or never a person talking with me in any way. So it's possibly a delusion on my part. I do not know.
Well, when you say possibly,
let's say for me,
you have to say
it's a leap of faith.
More than likely, and very plausibly,
It's a leap of faith.
A delusion on your part.
Well, from all evidence that I have, yes, it is 100% delusion,
Exactly.
Sydney, no doubt about it.
Right.
Enough to
So
drive
if
me
it's
crazy.
delusion, why not just leave it behind you?
I'm learning to be easygoing about that kind of thing, because if it is that everybody did get fish and bread and nobody ever said anything about it, not even to their own families, there is something really peculiarly wrong with all humanity at this time.
Well, there's just something peculiarly wrong with the information that you're receiving.
I mean, something so loving and simple and easy as free food, and I'm gonna say, because it's from Jesus, no one would say.
The thing is, Wesley, free food to you is of more value than to most people. Most people in this North American society that we live in.
The value in it to me is that it was just a good thing. and it was just from Jesus, just nothing to
Okay.
marvel at. Not to marvel at like the TV evangelists, they're going,
you have me.
hallelujah, that
You
up
have
out of
me
that
back.
wheelchair right now, and then look, he's healed everybody, and it never happened.
Okay,
that's
well, you have me
marveling.
back.
I don't want to marvel.
You have me back to questioning you about this Jesus.
Okay.
I still don't understand why you chose Jesus and not Yahweh and not Allah out of the only 3 choices that you had. Why didn't you just settle for the easiest one, which is Yahweh?
But I saw him. He appeared to me. He appeared to me twice.
People have
actually
imaginations.
3 times.
People have imaginations.
3 times, Sidney.
Yes, and
I saw Jesus with my own eyes.
What does Jesus look like?
He has a big nose, sort of a very dark skin.
I'm not interested. How tall is Jesus?
About 6'3". 6'2".
He's 6'3" with a big nose.
About 6'2".
Yeah.
He had black hair. It was very nice and clean, and sort of down the side of his head, almost straight.
Oh, he had long hair.
And he was wearing a snow white robe.
Did he have long hair?
Yeah, he kind of had long hair.
Why?
I didn't ask him.
That wasn't the custom of the day.
Well,
I
didn't ask him about hair care products that day, Sidney.
What did you ask?
Hey, Jesus, you created the heavens and the earth.
What did you ask him, Wesley?
Let's see. I didn't really ask him anything, and
so why didn't you ask him about hair products at least?
He was just, in my heart, confirming that he's really there, and confirming that I should be doing more for him than I'm doing.
But he doesn't exist. You've just as
I hear that a lot.
You've as much as stated it yourself.
I'd rather hear that. I'd rather hear that from you than have a fraud Christian going Jesus that denies that he is God in reality. I would rather hear you any time of the week. I got to tell you.
You want to hear me go and tell you that your Jesus doesn't exist?
Yes, I would rather hear you just be plain as you can be about it, and
you just watch any one of my videos.
To me that's a little bit to me that's I can hear that. You really believe it, and I disagree with it, but it doesn't bother me to hear you say it. It's when I hear Christians, when I hear someone that claims they're Christian that is not a Christian, that is withholding miracles from dying children, just really makes me want to walk right up to them and kick them square in the ass.
Are Protestants Christians?
Well, I think I've told you this before, Sidney. I don't believe anybody on earth that's claiming to be Christian that doesn't tell the vision is a Christian in any way.
Are Catholics Christians?
No. Everybody's worshiping money these days, Sidney. They say Jesus with their mouths, and they pray and they say Jesus when they're praying, but he gave them fish and bread, and he healed 2 teeth in their mouth, and they won't go around.
Are Baptists Christians?
No, I say none of them. I mean none. I mean 0.
Are you a Christian? Are you a Christian?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet. No.
When will you be a Christian?
I suppose when my soul is 100% clean, and it is not 100% clean right now.
Your soul is not 100% clean.
Yeah.
Is a soul like measurable? Like is there a gauge? From 0% to 100%. Where about is your gauge?
I was given a measuring device about that, Sydney.
Oh, interesting. Where do you stand?
Okay. 3 moments in time. First one about 12 years ago. The next one about 10 years ago. And the next one about 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So let's go all the way back to about 12 years ago. I'm asleep and I was in a jail and my head was lifted up and I was shown my spirit body. If I were to die and become an angel right then, I wouldn't have made it. My whole soul was dead gray ashes. I mean, it was like it wasn't a pleasant French gray. It was the color was dead, and
you haven't explained
it was
soul.
like, yeah, that's what my soul looked like from all the wickedness I had been doing over the years. Even though I said Jesus has baptized me, I'm saved, I was washed in his blood. The fact is, my soul was dead gray ash. And I did see the Holy Spirit. And it is like a pearl, a large pearl in the belly area. And it was snow white. And I saw that for, less than a minute of time. Now that's 12 years ago. So that was my first measuring device. My dead gray soul, ashes, filthy, and a pearl white, the Holy Ghost. So that's my first. That's my first measurement.
We just need one. That's good.
Well, I got a second measurement.
Yeah, I understand that, but we just need one. We don't need.
Well, this one's important.
No,
So,
it's okay because
yes, it is.
I believe that you got a measurement. But what I want to do is move the conversation along,
okay,
so that we don't get bogged down in unnecessary details.
Sure. Do you mind if I smoke a cigarette while we're doing this?
Can you open your window?
There we go. I'm in a tent. I've got a little desk lamp.
Can you open the flap? I just don't want to get any smoke in here. Okay, so if you can just open the flap,
sure. Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Do what you like.
So much for my A game. Here you go, Joel Osteen, right here.
Yeah, you do what you like. Boy, you can afford cigarettes. Yes, that is something that half the planet would love to be able to do. Afford a.
My second measuring device was when I was attacked by Satan and paralyzed.
Oh, you were attacked by Satan?
Yes, I did. Twice.
What were you?
Actually,
what were you wearing?
about 4 times.
What were you wearing? What were you wearing as armor? What kind of armor?
Felt like my.
What kind of body armor were you wearing when Satan attacked?
I was wearing a hospital gown, and I was in a psychiatric hospital called Madden in Chicagoland area.
So Satan attacked you when you were in a psychiatric hospital?
Yeah. I was forced to spend 14 days in a psychiatric hospital.
At what point after entering this hospital did Satan appear?
It was on October 10 in the year 2005.
That doesn't tell me when Satan appeared relative to when you entered this hospital.
I didn't see him. I felt him. I couldn't see with my eyes when it happened. And it felt like I was paralyzed.
Well, you told me that what Jesus looked like. And you had no problems describing Jesus as 6'2" and long black hair with a big nose.
Well, Satan's not going to. No one's going to know exactly.
Why would you say you can't see Satan?
I couldn't. He didn't want me to. He probably, he's very. He's very beguiling, and he likes to emulate. And if you actually saw who he really is, then all of his costumery and all
No,
of his performances and acts of deceiving would be exposed.
So Satan is more powerful than God?
Oh no, not in any way whatsoever. He's a lunatic, pretty much. He's just a lunatic. He's a genius. He's a genius, but he's a lunatic. He's extreme. He's more smart. He's probably the most intelligent person you could ever meet. But he's not smart enough to be kind and say, hi,
He's
how are you
obviously
doing?
more intelligent than Jesus.
Well, no, no one's ever going to be more intelligent than
Well,
Jesus.
you see, there you go. You're just presupposing. You're telling me one
Well,
thing, and then you're refuting yourself on the other hand. Because
Oh, I like the way you contradict me. I like that, Sidney. You're good at it. But anyway,
I'm just pointing it
Satan
out.
Satan paralyzed me, and
But
I could not move.
You don't know that it was Satan. You didn't see him.
Yeah, I do.
You just said you felt him. You said you didn't see him.
Yeah,
You felt him.
Well,
But you saw Jesus and you felt Satan. How do you know it was Satan?
Because he spoke in my head, and he said, I shall turn and toss you violently like a ball.
Satan said, I will turn you and toss you.
He said, I shall turn and toss you violently like a ball. Those were the words Satan put into
question.
It was like he was speaking directly into my head without actually speaking with the mouth.
Yeah, I got a question on that one. How did you feel when he said that?
Paralyzed. Like somebody was throwing electric jolts through my body. Or like I had just taken a $100 swing of crack cocaine.
Well, there's something that you've just proven.
It wasn't entirely unpleasant.
I understand what you're
saying. In other words, it wasn't painful so much as a sharp pain. But I was paralyzed and could not move. And my body was electrified.
I see. But you've proven one thing. That Satan is a liar. Because if Satan said you're going to bounce around like a ball and all this kind of nonsense, well, you didn't bounce around like a ball. You aren't bouncing around like a ball. Satan lied to you.
Well, here's the measuring device, Sidney. When he did that on October 10th, he could only touch the part of me that was the dead gray ashes. And by that date, that pearl of light had restored those ashes into light up to about here, up to about shoulder height. From the shoulders up, still ashes. From the shoulders down, apparently my soul had been restored and turned into that snow white light of that white
I can't
pearl.
understand how your soul can be restored if you were so despicable.
I told the vision from Jesus. I said, Jesus, I'm an evil man. I don't believe in your forgiveness.
Well, first you have to make restitution. First you have to make First you have to make restitution to all those who you wronged before your soul can be redeemed.
Have you ever heard that story about that tale, that wives' tale, where a guy goes to a wise old man and says, "I've done so many evils. How can I make amends to all this?" And he says, "Go and bring 1,000 feathers in a pillow." And he takes a year to get these feathers off of different birds, and he puts them into a pillow, and he brings them to the wise man on the hill. And the wise man takes the pillow, and the young man says, "Am I now atoned for all my sins?" And then the wise man rips the pillow open, and all the feathers fly by the wind all off into the everywhere. He says, "Now go find each one of those feathers, and then your sin will be atoned for." So that's the analogy for how long it would take for me to actually go to every person I've ever wronged.
Well, then why, if your atonement for your soul cannot be achieved, then why are you harping on it?
Well, that's a precipice there, Sidney. It can be, and I said, Jesus.
You just said you don't have enough time.
That's why he gave the vision. That's why he said, "Say, I haven't been getting involved. I fail you, Jesus. So you showed me palm trees with orange red in the bottom, dark green leaves."
Hold on, I thought Satan was the one who appeared to you, and why are you talking to Jesus now? How do you talk to Jesus and not Satan? And how do you know which one is receiving your message?
Well, what I'm saying is, because I said that vision, it magnified that pearl that I'd seen in my belly, and it transformed or restored those ashes into light.
You have
And
a
Satan could only get into me from the shoulders up, but from the shoulders down, all those ashes were no more ashes.
you're
They
very
were light,
OCD. You're
and you
very
could not touch
OCD.
it.
You're very OCD on the ashes.
Well,
Where
that's
do
what
the
they look
ashes
like.
where do the
They look
ashes
like a pig had been roasted on a barbecue beyond edible.
where do the ashes come from?
My sin. Those ashes have a name. It's called death. And there's a verse: the wages of sin is
Yeah,
death.
but
So
you're
every time
circling.
I did a sin, part of my soul became a flake of death.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
that's the reality.
that's a lot to bear. It's a major burden to bear, man.
I say it breaks down the walls and it gets right to the reality of what the real story is about all this forgiveness and sin and what happens to us when we sin. I say it gets right down to the reality of
Oh, it does,
it.
doesn't it?
So,
So,
I believe so. I'm gonna stand firm and say that's the way it is
okay.
in
Well,
face and light of all hypodermic needles.
all right. So, you had a platform tonight, and I thank you for coming on and giving your point of view.
Thanks for letting me be here. Like I said, I would much rather listen to you talk than a phony Christian any time of the day.
All right, I kind of appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go back to Nate. You're welcome to watch on the YouTubes on the screen on the stream on YouTube.
You got it. You
But
got it. I'll watch
okay.
a little bit.
Alrighty.
It's 3:57 here, so
All right.
okay.
Take care.
Good to
man.
hear you.
Yeah. Take
Okay.
care. Okay. Well, yeah. Something there. All right. We can carry on with this guy now.
To replicate themselves than others. And that's a selection.
Mhm.
But they're not alive. But, well, they're not really dead either.
And we find that in a lot of things in nature, the things that are in between. We have things in between plant and animal. We have things that are in between living and non-living, and we're always going to have that. But for all practical purposes, right now, the biological theory of evolution starts with what we think of currently as life. And what Fiona's saying is absolutely right. We may change the definition of the biological theory of evolution to include self-replicating molecules and viruses. I mean, we do speak casually about viruses evolving. So there is that gray area. But for most practical purposes, we are starting with the existence of, well, basically prokaryotic life, because that's where it starts for us. And yeah, it could be redefined. Again, that's science for you.
So, Becky, I guess to do like well, by the way, first, and Fiona, I don't know that much. I know you have your PhD. I already forgot what in, but I'm really curious. I don't know much about you or your career or your life. Could you tell us real quick? First of all, I know you told me last night. What do you have, like a one PhD, 2, 3, 4, a collection? And what's it in? And how long have you been doing this? And what field of study you're actually in? And how long has your career lasted?
Right. I started in biological sciences, got my honours degree, specialising in microbiology. I did my master's in medical microbiology. It was a part research degree. And I worked in the health service in bacteriology. I then went off and did my PhD in biosciences, and that was mainly in bacterial physiology, and particularly in the survival response of bacteria to carbon starvation and how they manage to survive in these really unfavourable conditions. I then went on to postdoc in a biochemistry lab, and I was looking at the induction of liver enzymes in response to some basically pollutants that you get from oil spills, as a way of looking at fish and measuring the level of gene expression in their livers to see if there were still pollutants present in the area. So that, everybody will remember the Exxon Valdez and the Sea Empress off the coast of Wales. And even although one of the beaches off Wales, it looked perfectly clean, they're ready to, let people back on it. But the fish were still showing effects. These enzymes were still raised. And when they scraped back the sand, they found this huge thick layer of oil. And the fish were the first thing that told you that it must still be there. And then I moved on to looking at the effect of estrogen mimics on male fish in the marine environment. And again, it was looking at gene expression levels.
And how many years or decades, it's probably safe to say, have you been in the fields you just mentioned?
That's 30 years.
How long?
30 years.
And are you retired now, or are you still
yes.
working?
Oh, yes. To be honest, a research environment, especially on the fixed-term grants, it's hard going. And I could honestly say that I think I had burnout by the time I was in my 40s, because you're always working at the edge, and you're putting in 18-hour days and 20-hour days and working weekends. You don't get paid for any of this extra time. And you're always up against deadlines, and the deadline is always, please have it finished by last week.
Yeah. The deadline is you're always late. That's the deadline.
Yeah, and then to move on from the research environment, you would look for an academic position, tenureship. That takes you away from the lab bench and gives you more teaching responsibilities, rather than the sort of not too much teaching that you have as a researcher. And I wasn't interested in getting into that and coming away from the bench, because I'm a bench scientist. That's what I do best. I don't like juggling grants and forms and undergraduates are anathema to me. I do not like undergraduates.
And quickly, what about you, Becky? Should we label you bacteria enthusiast, or?
Well, I'm more of a eukaryote enthusiast. As I said, bacteria I don't really know a lot about. I find bacteria quite confusing. But then I haven't really spent a lot of time studying them.
And
if I want to know bacteria, I'll go to Fiona.
Well, what exactly is your background? Like, how long have you been doing what you do with your...
Well, I started studying biology at UCLA, and I became sick, and I had to quit school. I later ended up in the computer industry, but I've always studied, and I've always taken classes. I have no degrees in anything. I do, however, have more college units than you would think is humanly possible. I just never bothered to get a degree.
Yeah,
as a matter of fact, I have taken astronomy 3 times.
Huh. Well, yeah, I said last night that reminds me of, like...
Funny.
Huh?
But you may find that funny, but the reason I took astronomy is because it kept changing. I took it in 1968, 1973, and 1983.
Yeah, that wasn't like a ha, like haha. That was like a ha, like ah. Anyway, that's what that was. But yeah, I said like last night that reminds me of Good Will Hunting, right? How like, I'm a big believer in that. Like, I think accolades and like credentials and things, I think they're important, especially depending on what you're doing, like for jobs, career, things like that. But I don't want to miss it and say, well, a layperson, I mean, can do just as much, especially with the resources we have. I think it's I think huge cautionary flag. Without the proper education and structure, there's amazing, avenues to get lost and come up with all kinds of stuff that, people with a formal education will be screaming at. But I think if you're careful and if you have proper guidance and good critical thinking and reason, then you can end up knowing, and these can be peers of yours and everything except the paper. I think the chances of that happening are much less than people with a formal education, just for whatever reason. Stuff gets in the way. They don't have a job that demands they're up on the latest current stuff. Anyway, so I guess with you two, people so far, as nucleic acid enthusiast, as career scientist, and myself, for whatever I can add, we're basically saying, look, guys, it doesn't matter what you believe. Just if you're going to invoke the name of science, please say what science actually says. And what evolution actually says, versus what we say it says, and include our agenda or bad knowledge or whatever. So anyway, I think the point here is science and religion have always been friends. I think a lot of people have got it wrong and tried to make them enemies, but it's winning out, and you're like, oh, well, what science actually says, it really, science and religion can hold hands. One answers the how, one answers the why. Anyway, with that in mind, I want to jump to Mind of a Heathen. He actually reached out to me on my YouTube channel a few days ago wanting to chat, and this is our first meeting. So welcome to, I guess it's your first time on Google Hangouts, you said, right? Mind of a Heathen? We put him to sleep?
Yeah, I've never used this before, so I'm still trying to figure everything out. I don't know how you guys work, so.
What should I call you, by the way? Mind of a Heathen's kind of long.
Yeah, just call me Mark. That's my actual name.
All right. So, Mark, how are you finding Google Hangouts so far?
It's not too bad. I mean, I don't think my computer is the best for it. I mean, it seems to be lagging slightly. I don't know if it's my connection or my computer or just too many people. But I mean, it's a pretty like as the basics of it is like pretty awesome. How you could just like stream live like that.
Well, yeah, like I said earlier, welcome to your new addiction. And by the way, if anyone wants in, nickcunningham.org/guest, and the link to join is there and will be every time shortly before the show starts. But Mark, is there any question or topic specifically you had? You mentioned something about morality that can turn into 6 or 7 hours real quick.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you want to poke that beehive, or do you want to ask something else, or whatever is up to you?
Oh, I mean, as I was saying, yeah, I mean, I really don't know how you guys work, but yeah, I mean, if anybody has something on the religious morality side, I don't know who here is religious and who here isn't. I mean, Nate, I know you are. I don't know everyone else's viewpoint. I mean, obviously, I'd like to get viewpoints from everybody in the chat room.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll give you mine, and then you guys, let's try, I guess, pick your spot and jump in, or say something in chat if you don't want to be rude and jump over people and all calling you, but yeah, just, try to keep in mind, don't talk over each other. It's going to happen, but, when you notice two people are talking at once, do a little give and take, and, try to keep it from blah, 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 blah. So I guess for my thought on morality, I do believe there is objective morality. I do believe there's a God, and basically everything comes from the origin of this deity. So, as such, I think he's in a very objective place to, decide what morals are. And, how could you know a God, right? I agree with kind of the atheist position, except if this God wants to be known, I totally think that's a possibility. So I think, when we have the Bible, I really believe this is kind of this deity's inspired message to us, with some really basic things. I think people convolute it more than they should, but among them are, basic common sense ideas on how to live, how to socially thrive, how to be peaceful with people, and generally treat people the way you want to be treated. And the spirit of that message is good, kind, compassionate. Anyway, so yeah, I do think there is objective morality. I think we're all subjective in how we live up to it, because we're all, unique individuals. So no matter how similar we may be, we're all going to do life slightly different. So yeah, I do believe there's objective morality. I do believe that we're all subjective in how we live to it. As far as what that looks like in the life of me as a Christian theist, I think it's simple. I mean, really, I hold to this concept, love God, that I believe exists and loves me and wants this parental type relationship. So, of course, the fact that he says, hey, love me and love people, these are the greatest things you can do, I'm totally on board. I don't need to be told that. I would do it anyway, but the fact that it's there, I'm like, okay, fine. I believe that anyway. And the other part is love people. So treat your neighbor as yourself. And I think, biblically speaking, neighbor is anyone that you come in contact with. That's your neighbor for intents and purposes. And to people that are like, well, I love you, so I have to force my religion down your throat. We have great biblical wisdom in 1 Corinthians 13. Like if you've been to a wedding, you've heard it, right? It gives descriptors because love is subjective. When people say love, well, I love my dog over there sleeping. I love my cat. I love my wife and kid. Hopefully I love some of them more than the other. But I think the biblical term of love is really defined in 1 Corinthians 13. It says, love's not proud, it's not angry, it's not boastful, it's, doesn't insist on its own way, it hopes for the best in people and things like this. So it really defines love in such an objective way, I feel, that if you get this concept, love God, love people, you're going to end up being a good, moral person that I don't think anyone should really have a problem with. Just as a consequence of you really believing that, well, this is A, the right thing to do, and B, this falls right in line with the deity I believe inspired all this, all life, all everything. So I would not say that, oh, only Christians have some moral high ground. Look at history. Clearly, no one has a moral high ground. There is such amazing candidates for infamy on atheists, who are identified as atheists, Christians, other theists. So clearly, humanity is great at falling short of whatever mark we set for itself. Unless it's a bad one, then we do that pretty well. So I'm not going to say that atheists can't be moral. I totally believe people don't need to espouse a belief in a deity to do good moral stuff. I happen to think, though, that we're created in the image of this deity, and that's why good moral atheists are able to be good moral atheists, whether they recognize a deity or not. I think we have these kind of attributes and traits that carry over. Anyway, that's my, I guess, my thing. So I guess if you want to respond to that, Mind of a Heathen, and then whoever else, just pop in. Does that make sense, or totally hate everything I said, or?
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying. I mean, I know, like, everyone, and everyone, especially in the Christian faith, they always like to, bring about the good parts that their religion teaches them. I understand that, and there are some great messages in the Bible that do teach love your neighbor, and I get why people want to bring that up and try to live their lives by that. It's great, but there are parts of the Bible, and I'm sure you know it, that are completely morally disgusting. I mean, I'm sure you've heard these arguments before, so I'm not gonna, just go on them like you've never heard before. But I mean, there's even a verse where Jesus himself says, "Bring my enemies before me. Do not want me to be king." I don't know the exact verse, but it's something about bringing my enemies before me and kill them at my feet. So obviously, there are parts in the Bible. You can't just use the Bible as a way you want to live morally. And only cherry pick certain parts of it. So you can't just say that. You did say that you do believe that atheists can be moral, but you still think that it comes from a God. However, when you read the Bible, if you truly believe that that's the true word of God, your God has done some pretty evil stuff.
Well, I think there's certainly. Well, first of all, the parable you're talking about is a parable. So if you read that story, I think it's in Luke. I don't know the chapter. Someone brought it up recently, but I'm like, look, yeah, yeah. So they're like, look, Jesus says, bring these people, and he's going to kill them. And I went to it. I'm like, just look at the beginning of that, where it says this is a parable. Anyway, so Jesus is clearly telling a story. Like, this is not him saying do this. First of all, because it never happened, no one ever did it. He's simply telling a story. Anyway, I guess maybe we need to distinguish if we're talking about our morality and how we live in this world, or if we're putting God on trial, because I guess I have a couple lines of thought on that. First of all, I think God, doesn't change. I think he's the same deity he's always been. So I don't think he, I don't think he's done necessarily evil things. I think the closest it comes is where I would say, well, this seems like judgment or justice based as a consequence on whatever happened. There's plenty of examples in the Bible, and, I'm not aware of anything that says God took these perfectly good people and destroyed them. It's usually like people were warring, people were murdering, all this stuff was going on, and the biblical narrative says something like it was cast judgment upon them, or it was some sense of justice. Whether we all agree it was actually a just act or not, that's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm simply saying the Bible makes the point that this is a just thing based on whatever it's talking about. I guess I'll stop there. I want Floyd to ask. Floyd, I just saw the evolution thing. I don't know if we're too far past it, or if you wanted to weigh in on morality now, but you've been quiet this whole time. Go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I was hoping to kind of get back on the original topic. In regards to evolution, and maybe Becky and Fiona can answer this. I'm not a scientist like them, so I think they'd be best to answer it. As far as evolution being repeatable and observable, what is repeatable and observable in evolution, like other scientists, like geology and things like that, is we repeatedly observe same evidence. So, for example, in evolution, we repeatedly observe rabbit fossils not being in the same Earth layer as dinosaur fossils, for example, and DNA repeatedly following a tree of life, so to speak. So isn't that what is considered repeatable and observable in evolution?
Sorry, I had to. Go ahead, Fiona.
Yeah, I would say yes, that is it. But also you've got to remember that I tried to explain this last night tonight as well, that the experimental work itself, to be valid, has to be repeatable with the same results obtained. Now, when you look at the subject matter of the experiment, it may seem miles away from evolution, and you may be struggling to see what bearing it has on it. But when you are deep into the subject, you understand, why this experiment is very important, and it's the fact that you've got to be able to repeat the experiment. Different people have got to be able to repeat the experiment, and those different people have got to get the same results. So the results are independent of the experimenter. And that's where your repeatability comes in. If that makes sense.
You good with that, Floyd?
Yeah. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, and I if anyone wants to keep talking about the original topic, that's fine. But don't do it to oblige to me. Like I'm not trying to be a stickler. Like if we're done with the topic, we can totally move on. If you want to keep talking about it, please do, but not for my benefit. If the consensus wants to move on, I'm totally fine with that. Well, I guess Sokka or Mind of a Heath or Mark again, if you guys want to say anything.
Well, I had a question just about the morality thing, which in reply to what you said.
Sure.
Is that you said that you believe in an objective morality, and what does an objective morality mean to you?
Well, I think I'll let my original answer speak. I'll just recap it. That I do think there's, a source of everything. I think that deity is the source, this God of the Bible. So I think basically whatever his sense of morality is, I think that's objective because he's the origin of everything. So if there's ever someone in a position to be objective, it would be him. At least from our vantage point. For all intents and purposes, how I said I do think there is objective morality, but we're all subjective. Even people that think, the Bible is God's kind of guidelines, and they're basic. They're not like, it's not something like, oh, this deity gave me these guidelines. It's very simple, basic human traits that we should be doing anyways. We've been doing hundreds of or thousands of years before the Bible. So I don't think it's that the Bible contains some secret. I think it's because we are innately created with some of these attributes that this is just common sense to have a good socially thriving society. But my point about it's subjective and how we live up to it, that's really where I stand. Because like the Bible says, the greatest thing you can do is love God and love your neighbors yourself, right? And by the way, to the cherry picking thing earlier to Mark, this is taking everything. This is taking all the 613 laws in the Old Testament that don't apply to non-Jewish people anyways, but just for giggles, it's taking all that, everything the prophets say, everything in the Bible, everything out of the Bible, basically everything in existence ever that you can do good. He's saying it's all-encompassing. If you love God and love your neighbors yourself, you're basically fulfilling every single demand anyone could ever make. So that's why it's not cherry-picking. Like all the other things, I think that people would say, well, look, you have to go to church on Sunday, even though that's not in the Bible, or you have to keep the Ten Commandments, you have to do this. If you truly and sincerely love God and love your neighbors yourself, all that stuff is like categorically taken care of in loving God and loving people. So it's anyway.
Yeah. So, well, no, not really.
We're all subjective in how we fulfill objective morality. That doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean that's pretty obvious. But what I say is that that the choices we make are always going to be subjective. I mean, the subjectivity implies choice. I mean, whatever. But just about the objective moral part is that so. If you say that objective morals just come from God, I mean that would mean they'd be subjective to the mind of God, right?
Well, perhaps, but I mean, if you want to nuance it out, and it's almost like the problem of evil. If you want to indirectly trace everything back to God who created everything, then I guess you can blame God indirectly. But if you want to just look at the problem in the face, you want to go to the direct cause of the evil. So like this, I really think God is objective, and then if you want to nuance that out and say, well, God is subjective.
How are you defining objective though? That's the part that I'm just gonna get curious on here.
Yeah, I was going to ask that as well, because I've got a horrible feeling that the way I'm hearing it in my mind is not the way you're using it, Nate.
Well, does this help? So I said it. I don't know if you didn't hear, but I also the second time I explained it, I said, for all intents and purposes, even you could say that even if God subjectively, whatever, for all intents and purposes, it applies to us, it's really objective. So if God is, subjectively saying, well, this is my subjective morality, but as far as you humans are concerned, this is the most objective thing on earth because I'm God. So, I mean, I'm really not dogmatic about it. I think there's a lot of perfectly fine, semantics and different explanations and different reasons, because it's kind of like, more of an idea for me than an absolute. I mean, I'll say I believe in absolute objective morality, but then I'll define it as I did. So if someone wants to challenge that and say, okay, well, what you said makes sense, but I'd technically say this is subjective from God's vantage point because, okay, fine, call it what you want. I think, my explanation will convey my concept in a way you get.
Well,
that's right.
Let me just talk this out. I mean, obviously you've heard of Euthyphro's dilemma, then, correct?
Heard of what?
Euthyphro's dilemma.
I don't know what you're saying. Euthyphro's dilemma?
Yes.
No.
Okay. If morality is based off God. Okay, he set the moral framework, but it's subjective to him. At any given moment, God can change his morals. He can change the morals for every single person on earth, and it would become a new objective morality for us.
Okay, I'm with you.
Okay, so at any given time, because morality is just subjective of God, if God decided to change his mind and say that now, killing is okay, would that make it killing okay for all of us? Would that be an objective moral action for us to do?
Well, first of all, I don't know if it would make it okay. I don't know if we were talking about the okayiness or not. I think we were talking about is there or isn't there. But there is these little things in the Bible. Believe it or not, it's in there. That talks about God never changes. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So whether or not God at some point decided to subject himself to these things, or if he's like, hey guys, I have no intention of changing, therefore I'm not going to change. So as far as Christian theology in the Bible is concerned, what you say in theory is true. But according to Christian theism, that simply will never happen.
Did God just arbitrarily decide what morals are?
I don't think we have any way of knowing that. I think a better question to ask is, I think God, kind of has these concepts of how to live, how to treat people that are consistent with his character. And, there's lots of attributes describing God. So away from the immoral acts we think he did, and, we're trying to look for solutions and reasons and explanations, I think, we could go to the part of the Bible where we don't have to interpret. It actually tells us certain attributes.
There's a great thing you said there, is that you, so these moral laws, God recognized them as objective facts as well. So did he get these objective facts from a higher power?
Hey, Roy, you want to jump in and talk? I have a phone call real quick, But no,
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case, Sokka. But give me 1 second. Roy, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Sokka. Say it again.
If the morality of God is unchanging, if God just either God kind of arbitrarily just decided what was moral, and which case, fine, whatever, he could have picked something else, that's fine. It still seems subjective to him, in the sense that let's say that God couldn't do this because of his nature, of his character, however way you want to put it. Well, where did God get those traits from then? Because then there would have been an objective moral source for God to have pulled his objective morality from.
Well, again, I get what you're saying, and in theory, that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. But that really conflicts with, kind of Christian theism, which is, well, it's kind of my thing. So, in the way you explained it, great. I don't think that's consistent with reality, though, because, we could trace this back to, well, what came first, God or this, or who created God? And, it seems like such a difficult concept, to wrap your mind around just always. And you're like, well, I get always. That sounds nice, but first cause. No, always. Okay, I get that, but first cause. So it's really difficult to wrap your mind around, but I think this is true, that in whatever way, maybe someday we'll understand, maybe we'll prove it, maybe we never will, but this God has always been this way, so it's not like he was taught, it's not like he was learned, he just is. However that is possible, however that happens, he just is. Like, rather than starting and ending, maybe it's an infinite loop.
Here's what I'm thinking.
Let me try that one more time here, Roy. Sorry, if you don't mind. The thing with Euthyphro's dilemma is that if something good because God says it's good, or is it good because it's innately good? Now, if something is good because it's innately good, that means that there is a power which God would have to pull his moral from. If he's saying that something is good just because he says it's good, then you're saying that something that is good comes from the nature of God. Why is it so hard then to believe that these objective moral facts that that we have out there, why do they have to be part of God's character? Why can't objective morality be dependent on just humans? Why can't we just have objective moral
Well,
facts outside of God?
here I'll answer this way. So you have to start with authority.
No, you don't.
And if God is not the final authority, first authority,
Mm.
if he's not the first and the last, then you can go elsewhere for that, and then there's no need for God. So if you are one of these folks that have a problem with authority, and what I mean by problem is I mean seeing the absoluteness thereof. In other words, when you say, does it come from God and where did he get it and so on and so forth, is that, okay, then you got to bypass God and you got to go, okay, so what's the final authority? You need the first and the last. So I think you're having a problem saying that.
Well,
God,
it's a huge assertion on your part to say that you need a final authority. I want to know where
you don't need a final authority. You can just willy-nilly deal with whatever you decide, and we never know when you decide to make a change unless we get your memo.
What do you mean?
What I mean is, if
you said that
something has to be the same yesterday, today, and forever. It has to be consistent, so that you can depend upon it, just like we depend upon the sun coming up every day, right?
Okay.
Now, if God decides to end the world, the sun isn't going to come up tomorrow. So I get that, and he's the final authority to make that decision. He doesn't have to confer with anybody.
But see, I think. Well, can I actually answer a question you made a little bit ago, Sokka?
Sure, absolutely.
So, you kept saying things like, well, why does it have to be? Why does it have to be this? Why does it have to be this? I don't think it has to be. I think it just is. So I don't think God has to do this. I don't think this has to be done. I don't think we need to cleverly explain why this must be. I simply think this is. So by the time I'm saying it, I'm just kind of reporting the news. So I really think, though, it's not mutually exclusive. Like, if this is God's character, it seems like the presentation, I know you weren't doing this, but it seems to go there quickly, that it's either what God says is right or it conflicts with morality. And I'm like, wait, these are not mutually exclusive. Like, if you just read the life of Christ, most people are going to be like, with an exception of someone pointing out a parable and saying, well, look, Jesus wants to kill people. Clearly parable. Anyways, but if you just read the narrative, how compassion, caring, concerned with other humanity he was, how he's willing to help, relieve pain, suffering, oppressions, these type things, this is consistent with the life of what anyone would say, that is a great humanitarian. I want to be like that. That's how I live my life because that's the right thing to do. So if Jesus truly is, the Bible makes the claim that I believe, that Jesus is the direct incarnate image of this God. So the way you're basically living your life is really consistent with basically the way Jesus lives his life, as encouraging all of us to do, which is, what this God is. It's his characters and attributes. It just coincidentally happens to be consistent with what pretty much anyone is going to deem a good moral way to live a life.
Okay. So this is a good point here, and let's cut straight to the chase.
Yeah, I just want to cut in here and agree with Freethinker. You said that God just is. So when I say that the universe just is, why is that wrong? Absolutely, 100% correct. I couldn't agree with you more, Freethinker. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the show. Bulldog, how you doing, Bulldog? How come you never come and talk to me here, Bulldog? Excuse me. Who else is in here? Assembly of God. We've said hello. Good. I think we've said hello to everybody. But both are axiomatic. I agree. Freethinker. But I also think that when you say the universe just is, in other words, when you say reality just is, that is more plausible than saying God just is. Because reality we can see, we can experience. God, on the other hand, we cannot see, we cannot experience. And most everybody will say that it's I heard about God from somebody else. That's what most people will tell you. So, Freethinker, Kudos to you.
Case here is that what would you have to look at any given action in order for you to distinguish it as right or wrong?
Can you say it one more time?
What would you have to do? What characters, what attributes would you have to attach to a certain action in order for you to distinguish it as right or wrong?
Well, I think that's hard to answer. There's not a blanket answer. I mean, you have to. I mean, if you just want an answer, that could be scary. We see what happens when people are just given answers. But with proper critical thinking, I'd say, well, first of all, we need to look at the circumstances. Secondly, how does this pull on my conscience? How do I?
Did he just say with proper critical thinking? With proper critical thinking, Nate, you arrive at hashtag Jesus is a myth when you use critical thinking. You cannot arrive at Jesus and claim that you have used critical thinking. Just ain't so.
I feel? How does my conscience and my being tell me, is this good or bad? Is it harmful? Is it helpful? Is it neither? Is it just a thing? What's this other situation? So I think there's a lot of factors that go into this. So I would love to give a blanket answer, but I don't think that's honest. I think it's very nuanced, case by case.
So you're saying that you couldn't take a look at something and be able to distinguish it whether it's right or wrong?
Oh, I could. Like, for example, if someone's like, hey, we're going to kill this guy outside your house because we just want to, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm so confident saying that is horrible. Please do not do that.
Okay.
But if you're like, well, this person stole it,
But why? Why would that be something that you would characterize as wrong? What traits does that action have that you link to it being wrong?
Because of things I just gave. First of all, it really rails against my own conscience. Secondly, I see it as a undue pain and hardship and death to someone who, unless they're going to tell me they just killed a village in Africa, they're an innocent person. They've not done anything to deserve this. Even if they had, I still don't think violence is ever a key, no matter how evil someone is. That's my own kind of metric.
Okay, so
absolutely wrong. Violence is sometimes needed.
So you brought up a really good point there, is that the action itself of just killing someone there is something that is not promoting any is something that is increasing pain or suffering for that individual. So I mean, you can recognize that now as wrong. What I'm saying is that you can take a look at any of these actions, and you can take a look at any choice that you have. And generally, when you take a look at them, like things, and this is just a broad, like I said, like you said yourself, you can't bumper sticker morality or anything like that. But in the end, things that promote happiness, welfare, well-being, health, happiness, whatever I said there, things that diminish, pain and suffering. These are things that are that are objective facts out there. We can track these things. We know what these things are. The things that decrease health, happiness, well-being, or increase or promote pain and suffering, these things are things that we can associate with wrong. Now the question is why? Why can we do this? Because the thing is that these attributes, these things like pain and suffering and health and happiness and well-being, these are objective facts. We know what these things are. We know what the results of these things are, and we can measure these things. The how somebody feels is not contingent on my mind. It's not just subjective to me. That because we have these objective moral facts, you can take a look at any action and therefore come to some type of conclusion that that objectively this is morally wrong or morally right or whatever. Now you can do this, and you can create this framework, and you can actually solve the majority of the problems that come from these moral questions without ever having to plead to a god, and those are still considered objective moral facts. So where in that do you need to put God into? Because from what I understand is this moral framework works completely without having to plead to a god.
I couldn't have said that better. So this is a huge point, right? Like, there are Christians that will scream all day how you're going to be Satan's slut for eternity for what you just said. But, me and as many people as I can hopefully educate, I really think what you just said is perfect. You can come to these conclusions. You don't need a belief in a God. I mean, again, like I said earlier to Mark, I really think these abilities or these these things are innate in us because we're created in the image of a God. But that, that's just my own opinion. But still, that's how you can do these good moral things, come to these conclusions, or like objectivity, like the non-aggression principle, things like that, without any belief in a deity, any recognized belief. So I think that's fine. I also think that has nothing to do with Christianity, or I think it has something to do, but it is certainly not the emphasis. Like
Right.
Christianity is not. I want to say one more thing, then I have to step away for just a second.
Sure, no problem.
But you know, Christianity is not like behavior modification. It's not, hey, come to Jesus. This guy died so you can live forever, and you know, paid this price that you don't want to pay, and you know, he can save you from, well, yourself. Anyway. But now you have to be like this. You have to do this. You have to do that. That's it. Like that's where it stops. That's the main thing. So I think, you know, the morality in Christianity it's really stating the obvious. It's like, look, guys, you should already know this stuff. People have been doing it for thousands of years. But in case you need a reminder, yeah, don't suck at life. Help people. Be compassionate. Be caring. Be concerned about your, you know, fellow human. Let me share this one thing real quick, and then I'll be back in just a minute. But I got to go check on baby. But yeah, this is a quote from Ravi Zacharias. I actually saw it recently. Am I screen sharing? There I am. So this says it really concise and great. The Christian faith, simply stated, reminds us that our fundamental problem is not moral. Rather, our fundamental problem is spiritual. It is not just that we are immoral, but that a moral life alone cannot bridge what separates us from God. Herein lies the cardinal difference between moralizing religions and Jesus' offer to us. Jesus does not offer to make bad people good, but to make dead people alive. So this is the absolute crux of Christianity, is not about being good. You can clearly be good without a belief in God. What you can't do, what Christianity teaches you can't do, is save yourself and eternally be cool with God based on something you do. It's simply a gift from this deity. It's like, hey guys, this is a no-brainer. I know you can be good without me. Great, that's fine. Be good. Be good however it takes you to be good. But the point I'm offering, the point I'm here for, this Jesus is here for, is to say, look, I paid a price that you can't or don't want to pay yourself because it's not going to be good. Recognize this deity creator wants a relationship with his creation, and that is the point of Christianity. And I think as a consequence, if you're not already a good moral person, if you really align yourself with Christ and his narrative, almost as a consequence, you're going to become more of a good moral person, which that's just like a bonus, but that is not the point at all. Make sense?
No.
Well, yeah, it makes sense.
It does not make
but
sense.
like I said, and this is just going back to my point. We're just talking about
I don't think
yeah,
it
you believe
makes
in
sense.
objective morality because of God. It's just like, well, why can't you believe in an objective morality without God? And Roy asked me what my final authority is. I laid out a pretty basic moral framework there that works and does not plead to an authority. So, you know, that, like I said, is morality. When we get into this talk about morality, when we get into talk about, you know, is morality dependent on God? Is morality dependent, you know, do we need to have that absolute source of morality in order to know what's good and what's right, what's wrong, what's bad, what's evil, you know, whatever, all these ideas out there, is you don't. Is that moral is not some, you know, morality is not some wild card that theists get to hold because they get to, you know, therefore justify everything because they have a book that says it's right or wrong. It's obvious that you can have, like I said, these objective moral facts without actually having to plead to a God. And that's so you could have objective morality without having a final authority.
Well, we've answered that, right?
Yeah, I know. That's what I was saying to Roy. Is like, why when Roy brought up the question, is like, well, who's my final authority? And I told him, I was like, well, that's a nonsensical question in the context of what we're talking about.
How about you, Mark? How are you finding this conversation? I'm sure you have something to weigh in on, right?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I just want to go back to what you said before you went to go check on your kid. Just so I can clarify what you said. You were saying, yeah, you do. You could live a moral life, but unless you accept the fact that Jesus paid that price for you, you're still not going to be pure in the eyes of the Lord. Is that what you were trying to say?
I think I said the cool box checked with God, but close enough.
Okay,
I really think that's it.
Okay. See, I don't think there's anything moral about that, though. I mean, if a God or Jesus is going to say, listen, I died for you 2,000 years before you were born, but if you don't believe in me because you don't think that you don't see a reason to believe in me, or you just don't know about me, but you're still a good person, you're going to go to hell or whatever the Bible teaches because you do not believe in the Christian faith. I don't think there's anything moral about that.
Well, and that's one point of view. What I think we need to consider, though, instead of passing judgment on God based on one view, is all the other stuff. I mean, literally, it could be a God-sized X factor. We don't know. So, you know, the Bible only gives us certain information, right? So quickly, that information generally goes, if you don't, you know, align yourself with this God, recognize Jesus died for you and wants to hang out with you in eternity forever. If you don't recognize that and you reject this, then we're taught you go to this place that seems very literal the way Jesus describes it, as a literal hell that's basically going to suck really bad for a really long time.
All right, so when you die, you got two choices. Before you die, firstly, you have to accept Jesus as your path to eternal life, which is something that is provided to you after you die. So you die before you get eternal life. You cannot have eternal life now while you're alive, just to carry on living eternally. No. First you got to die, and then you have eternal life. But my research has shown that once you die, what you receive is eternal death. Not eternal life, but eternal death. Scientific fact. Can't deny.
So that's pretty much a paraphrasement of the extent of information we're given in the Bible. So to automatically draw the worst possible conclusion and say, well, based on what I read, God's going to take a good moral atheist who simply doesn't believe he exists and burn him in hell forever. That's certainly a view. Consider that, please. But that has just as much supporting evidence as, well, for whatever reason, God requires belief as the currency. Maybe it's like power of positive thinking. If you believe it, that somehow creates a gateway to God. And if you don't believe it, well, it's not God's fault. He's doing everything to tell you, look, this is the one thing you can do to create an open door to me by believing, versus if you don't, I'm not doing it. You're just not creating a gateway to get wherever I am. Therefore, the alternative is this. So please recognize I'm not trying to sugarcoat or anything like that. I'm simply trying to take where we usually point out the worst case scenario, and I'm saying, well, look, that's definitely a view. Consider the worst case scenario. Consider the best case scenario, and then consider some possibilities in between. So I think that really lightens the burden and puts us on uneven ground to accuse God on a moral argument. Does that make sense? Even if you don't believe it, I think that viewpoint has just as much credibility as what you mentioned. And that's why I would seriously consider withholding judgment, on a deity based on the worst-case scenario interpretation.
But I think there are, if you don't mind.
There's only so many things, though, that you can choose what you want to take literally out of the Bible, and you can choose what you don't want to take literally out of the Bible. I mean, as you said before,
those are two literal examples that we both.
Say that again.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, but we're not doing that here. Like, you gave a literal example, and then I followed it with a contending literal example. So,
right.
Neither of us are talking in metaphors. We're both saying, like, this is literally a literal view.
But, Nate, you did say something there about, passing judgment there. Is that, where do you get the characteristics of God as being good?
Well, if we're going by what the Bible says, the Bible's very clear that Jesus is the incarnate, full representation of this deity. So everything Jesus does is a pure reflection. He says this, it's written about him, Paul says this. It's over and over in the New Testament in the life of Christ that Jesus says he only does what he sees the Father doing. We're told Jesus is the direct image of God. So everything Jesus does, this is the fullness of God in human form walking around. That's why. And then there's other parts where it actually talks about the old God of the Old Testament. Same guy, but it just happens to explain it in the old part of the Bible too. And it talks about how God is just and justice and righteous and all these.
Are you following all these convolutions to explain how God and Jesus are the same thing when they're not? They can't be the same thing. Law of identity and all that. Law, A is A and no. There is no way that this man, Nate Cunningham, has arrived at God through critical thinking. Has arrived at Jesus specifically through critical thinking. You'll claim that he has, but there's just no way he has.
These things, and it really actually makes the claim God is love. It doesn't just say God loves stuff sometimes. It says God hates things, God is vengeful, God is jealous. But the thing it says he actually is, however that's possible, it claims God is love. So
Exactly. It claims that God is love. But that's just a claim. Because first the claim that God is has to be proven. First you prove that God is extant, and then you prove that this existent God that you just proved exists is love. None of it makes sense. None of it.
I think, this is my opinion now, what I just said was what the Bible literally says. Now this is my opinion. If God does hate and does get jealous and does get angry and does take out vengeance, but he is love, then that means all these attributes that you may consider bad, if they come from a place of love, then that's only good. That's like if you go, like, you know, beat up someone who's like punching your mom. I mean, yeah, you're doing an action that normally you'd be like, that's bad, but it's coming from this place that you love your family so much that if someone's attacking them, you're going to defend them. And most people would say, oh, well, that's a very righteous action. That's how I say those things.
Oh yeah, no, you mentioned something about passing judgment on God there, and I was just thinking about the thing is that all the characteristics that you associate with God are based off of Scripture. You know, that you're pulling from these examples in Scripture to come to the conclusion that God is good. Why is it now apparently, you know, moving too far ahead, and we shouldn't be passing judgment using the same source of Scripture to come to the conclusion that the God is represented in the Bible might be an immoral monster to some people?
Well, that's fine. So, you know, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm simply saying the conclusions I come up with are because, well, like I just did, I try to take the worst case scenario, and not just in religion. Like, this just seems like good critical thinking skills. This just seems like a good word of wisdom for life. You know, when you're presented with evidence or data, you know, take a worst case scenario, take the best case scenario, and then try to come up with some things that are pretty moderate, because usually a compromise between the worst and best is usually accurate. That's almost some variant of Occam's razor. But that's why. So when someone doesn't do that and they just read, oh, if you reject God, then you're going to burn in hell forever, and they don't consider a best case, they don't consider any other scenario, they just immediately go to the worst case and stick to it. That's what I'm saying. So if you consider the best case, consider a couple middle-of-the-road ones, consider the worst case, and the conclusion based on all the data you've taken in is God is a moral monster, I disagree, and I'll explain why, but I think that's fair, because you've given it a fair assessment that is in line with what I think is a representation of good critical thinking. That makes sense, right?
So what about the... Okay, sorry, go ahead, Mind.
Yeah. How can you say not to take that literally, but then you take other parts of the Bible literally about just the fact of your religion even being true? If just to go to the accent, or the stories of Jesus being true, or anything in the Bible that you think is truth to be true. If you're not going to take that part literally, how do you distinct from the other parts and not take that literally?
Well, I think there's a little confusion. I'm not speaking to anything to do with allegory, metaphor, or literally. We're talking about the thing you said. We're talking literally. So I'm not saying don't take it literally. I'm saying don't automatically jump to the worst literal interpretation. Consider a best case literal interpretation. Consider a couple other middle of the road literal interpretations. So you're not doing allegory or metaphor, nothing. Everything is literal for what we're talking about. So I'm not saying don't take it literally. I'm saying take that literally and take a couple other scenarios literally. Then, based on all the data you have, what seems to be the most straightforward, accurate interpretation?
How do you figure out the truth?
What else? What are the other alternatives?
Nate, when you run all that, how does that get you any closer to which one was true?
It doesn't in all the cases, and that's what I'm saying. So I'm simply saying, like we just talked about science and evolution, right? I'm like, look, in lieu of certain things, either withhold judgment, or if you have enough data that factually works and can lead you to a conclusion you're wanting, then pursue that, but keep a tentative, opinion that this could be subject to change. But can you say what you said again, Mark? I lost what you said.
Sorry.
I was basically just repeating myself. You know how it like.
Oh, I remember.
I completely.
What a best case scenario was. So, yes. Right, like the worst case is evident. The worst case is, well, you're a good moral person who just happens to disbelieve a God, therefore God tortures and punishes and burns you forever in hell. My best case scenario I kind of gave was, look, God, for whatever reason, you have to believe in God. It's not because he's vain or something, but, maybe power of positive thinking. If you believe it, it happens. If you don't believe it, it doesn't happen. So, and I'm just throwing this out as a top of my head scenario, so don't take it too seriously. I'm just using this as an example. But also something to consider, best case scenario, literally. So if God's like, you have to believe, and you just don't believe, then the door never gets created. So it's not God's fault at all if you end up in this place. Or if for whatever reason you end up in hell and you're like, oh my gosh, hell is literal and it sucks really bad. Oh, but there's the door. So for all we know, the worst case scenario has God punishing you, keeping you there against your will, when for all we know, maybe you're pissed off at God that you end up in this place in the first place. So you're like, you know what? Hell does suck. It's really hot and it's really humid, but I would still rather keep myself here by my own will than ever be near that God because he's a jerk. That would be another best case scenario. So it's not more true than the other one, but I think you should consider that and be like, oh, well, this has just as much evidence as the worst case scenario because we're not told about the behind the scenes intent and all the workings behind the wheel.
Can I ask you a real quick?
I would hope a just, all-knowing, and an all-understanding God would understand why someone wouldn't believe in any religion, whether it's Christianity, Islam, or whatever.
Yeah, I'll let you go, X, but let me answer this real quick. Yeah, I'm not very dogmatic about much of anything. There's only like a handful of things I would consider myself really dogmatic about. This is one of them. I ardently believe, completely, that no person is going to end up in some hell by being a good moral atheist without a belief in God, and therefore they are eternally screwed. I simply do not think that's the case. What I think happens is if you go through life as a good moral atheist without a belief in a God, there will come some point or multiple points in this life where you have to make a conscious choice to absolutely reject this God and basically align yourself with the most evil entity ever, or you align yourself with this God and everything's cool. I don't think any innocent, helpless person ends up in hell just because. I simply.
What kind of a ridiculous dichotomy is that, Nate? This God doesn't exist. That's where everything and all the evidence leads us to conclude that this God does not exist. You cannot let that go. You cannot understand, for some reason or other, you seem to not be able to understand that this God that you mention is a figment of somebody else's imagination which you have embraced into your imagination. That's all it is. So for 2 hours you're gonna sit and talk about a God that doesn't exist, that you know nothing about, and that all you have to say is a whole bunch of ifs and maybes and perhapses. It's not cutting it, Nate.
We do not think that's the case. I think that's inconsistent with the life of Christ, the narrative of the Bible. I just don't see that at all.
All right, I'll let the other guy go ahead. I do have more to say, but I'll let him go ahead.
Yeah, X.
Mine's a quick opinion question, so you can go right back into it. Just on your opinion or what you read. Looking at it, the Bible's talking pretty much about your eternal soul. What the life you're going to prepare for. Seems like the most important thing of it, and I find the most important thing of it to be one of the most unclear things in the. Do you have an opinion on that, or do you have maybe a much clearer view than most?
Well, yeah, I don't think it's unclear at all. I think if you do like eschatology or the finer points or what is heaven and hell really like, but I don't think that's the primary point. The primary point is, look, there is life after this one, and Jesus fully represents God, and if you believe this, he died and lives again, then that is the main point. If you're willing to follow him and trust him to save you, that is crystal clear. It's said hundreds of times throughout the New Testament, and that's the point that is not mistakable. It's like, look, he says over and over, if you believe in me, you'll never die. If you drink this water of life, you'll live forever. And, if you believe in the one God sent, you will live forever. Those who believe in me won't perish. They will live forever. So it's not.
So, hold on. So that's what they're chasing? They're chasing this live forever thing? When they die, after they die, they'll live forever, like I said before? This is what their whole ambition is, the end game is you will die and then you will live forever. How? In this day and age, in any day and age, can anyone freely allow themselves to believe this?
Not just said really clear a couple times, it said really clear a lot of times.
Wow.
I
The
thought
last thing is,
that a
yeah,
minute.
go ahead.
That's what I thought a minute ago. You were saying that it wasn't, that it was, yes, believe, but you don't think this God is going to take it out on someone just because they didn't believe. Like that was almost an optional thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Could be a little more specific.
Just when you're talking about in believing in Christ, cause mine wasn't more on the afterlife, the being clear, but how you get to and where you go. And whenever we were talking about that, you kind of almost said it in an opinion of that God's not going to take it out on someone that doesn't believe in him just because they don't believe in him. So that it was almost an optional thing.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that's the primary point either. I'd say that's like the opposite side of the primary point. So if the primary point is, look, recognize God created you, he wants this eternal spiritual connection with you. If you recognize that, you're done. Jesus says you win at life. If you come to that realization and the willingness for him to save you, trust and follow him, that's it. So that's the primary point. And what we were talking about is the other side of that coin, which is, oh, well, if you don't believe God, if you reject God, well, then you go to this place that's hell, per mainstream Christian theology. Some believe in an island.
Yeah, yeah. On the subject of hell, and I'll tell you how I think that we know that hell is made up. Because when Nate or any Christian describes hell, each and every one of them use terms and use imagery from the natural world. So when they talk about hell, you can't imagine anything worse than a lake of burning fire or a lake of burning oil or whatever it is. You can't imagine anything worse on earth. That's that. So you put that, you make that as the ingredient of hell, and you make people think of what it would be like to be stuck in a lake of burning fire or whatever it is. And then you tell them that yes, it burns off all your skin, and then your skin regrows, and you have to go through all the pain over and over and over again for all of eternity. Is that what you prefer? But if you choose Jesus, then none of that will happen to you. You see, that's the story. It's nonsense. It's pointless. It's dangerous. Definitely.
But I'm more persuaded that
maybe that was it, Nate. Maybe the rejection line and the not believing line was, I see. What you just said there might have cleared it up for me. That is two distinct lines. One not believing, and then one actually rejecting.
Yeah, and I'm really, again, like I said, on that I'm pretty darn dogmatic, because I just do not see that at all. I don't think that simply not believing God is going to do anything bad for you. I think you're going to be hit with a point where like the parable Mark brought up earlier in Luke, whatever, where, Jesus is telling the story about this master whose servants, I forget what they did, but they did something that the master clearly was unhappy with, and as a result, he says, bring them here, I'm going to kill them. That's the parable, but I think there's a lot of parallels to that. So I don't think someone's just going to accidentally end up in hell because they don't believe in God. I think, and Jesus also says, the other thing about how he didn't come to bring peace, but a sword, right, to divide mother and daughter and family. So I really think this is clear if you just read the thing. He's forcing a decision. He's forcing a choice. So if you make it through life as a pure agnostic, right before you die, whenever it happens, I think there will be a very painfully obvious point or points where you go from not really sure, just not believing, to, okay, I have to make a choice. I'm all in on God's side, or I'm consciously rejecting this guy perpetually and eternally. How exactly?
Nonsense. Who the hell goes through life like that? I'll go through life agnostic, and on the very last second of my life, I'll make a choice. And based on that choice, I will either go to burn in hell or I'll go to heaven and God and whatever. I mean, how could it be any more blatantly a folklore tale, a fairy tale? Hey, Nate, and all you Christians, I hope you're beginning to see this, how futile, absolutely futile your quest is. And your quest is to prove the impossible, which is to prove that an impossible God exists. A God is impossible to exist. Your goal is to prove that this God does exist. And all you can come up with is, well, nothing.
Exactly that looks, I really don't know, but this is just my best conclusion based on the evidence I have.
I think you cleared it. I think I missed where you drew that line. I'm Indigo. I got you. Thank you.
How about some of you guys that have been quiet? Roy, Becky, Fiona, do you guys have anything to say about this, or Amin?
I don't really. I struggle with the idea of an absolute objective morality, but I think that's because I'm using a different definition of objective than you are, and it's a shame that Floyd's gone, because I wanted to ask him about that. I mean, objective morality to me would mean that the moral evaluation of something has got to be the same no matter who carries it out. And the problem I have there is that obviously we would say that thou shalt not kill, and yet we hear the arguments put forth that in fact God has killed. If you look at the Amalekites, I don't believe that's to be read literally, but let's just leave that aside for the time being. Those who do read that story literally, where God ordered the killing of all these people, that would mean that it's okay for God to kill, but it's not okay for us humans to kill. And that would be the very definition of subjective, as in the morality is dependent on the subject doing it.
Well,
that
I mean,
makes it not objective.
I think there's a case with to be made of lying as well, of God actually lying, and for the same thing you're saying of killing, and it becomes a subjective matter.
Mm-hmm.
What about the entire story of Job? Is by my you know that's fine. There's a lot of examples inside the Bible that I've heard people bring up to justify certain things. Just like, oh yeah, God killed the Amalekites. God did order the Jewish people to kill these people, but you should have seen what they were doing. It was pretty evil to begin with. But one of the stories I always have a hard problem with is Job. In the story of Job, God is an asshole. I'm sorry. It's like the only way I can put it in that context. There was no great lesson or anything like from that, except maybe on Job there. But I mean, the people that died, the experiences that he had, for what purpose, for what goal? And I don't know. It's a hard story that I find people. I don't find any satisfactory justification or explanation of that story.
Well, I think it's interesting that you picked Job, because I refer there a lot. So, you said there was no great lesson. First of all, Joel gets taken to school. So, yeah, he has a lot of crappy stuff that happens to him. And, again, if you indirectly want to trace it back to God, because God didn't, forcefully stop it and violate the will of this, Hasatan dude. But I think, people want direct causes. So directly, it's this Hasatan Satan character who inflicted this. So again, you can indirectly go to God, or you can look at the guy who directly caused this stuff. But you said there was no great lesson learned. People have been learning great lessons from the story of Job ever since it was written. So that's like thousands upon, 10,000 years, I think is how old they think the book of Job is, or something. A long, long time is how long people have been learning lessons. And in my own life, it's been invaluable. So, not to say that makes what happened to Job all fine and dandy, but to say there are definitely lessons throughout, the ages that have been learned because of the story of Job. And by the way, some people don't think it was real. Like, I think observant Jewish take is it didn't really happen. It was just a moral lesson. I won't go that far. I do think in some world it didn't literally happen, but just to point that out. This is not an area I'm dogmatic about. But yeah, so I think there was great lessons learned, and also, you know, I can give the reformist position a little bit here because I disagree with most of what they say, but there's one thing they always play is the card that, well, we don't know from our perspective, and one day it will be clear why every bad thing had to happen, and it was all for some good result, no matter how crappy it was. I don't really buy it how they use it necessarily, but there's great wisdom there, right? Like if you've seen the movie Vantage Point, it's like you would think the main character is the worst guy on earth. But then by the time you watch a few other vantage points and what actually happened from different perspectives, you're like, wow, I'm glad this guy wasn't on trial, because I would have, like, you know, sent him to the chair, and I would have regretted that forever. So I think, you know, what you say makes sense, and I think there's validity to consider that, but also consider we could be eating a fat piece of humble pie at some point.
So the lesson is, don't worry if bad things start happening. You just might be DNA tested.
Well, the lesson is bad things are going to happen. The lesson is, you know, this is, again, it's not interpretation. It's black and white. It clearly talks in the Bible about how bad things do happen to good people and good things do happen to bad people. You know, the exact thing is, you know, it rains on the just and unjust alike. So for whatever reason, it doesn't matter how good you are, crappy things are going to happen. It doesn't matter how evil you are, good things are going to happen. So that's made very clear. And then, you know, to take it one step further, even Jesus and his followers, right, and especially the early church, not much good happened to them. They were constantly being beaten, imprisoned, persecuted, tortured, and murdered. So, you know, if that's what happens for Jesus and his followers who are closest to him, what do we think is going to happen to the rest of us? It's just kind of reporting the news. So, again, good question. If God's all-powerful, why couldn't he snap his fingers and make everything perfect? Well, first of all, we believe that's what this, you know, life after this one is exactly going to be. Why it doesn't happen in this life, why it's been 2,000 years, good question. My opinion is it's a war zone and there's active, you know, like active stuff going on. There's like good people, there's bad people. I believe in the spiritual realm, which would mean there's any untold number of good spirit beings or bad energy, and they're pushing back against each other. So I really think the reason the world looks like a war zone is because it is.
All right. I'm just gonna throw my 2 cents in about the story of Job. Like, I mean, I absolutely do get the message, you know, on your side of it. You know, bad things do happen to people. It sucks, but that's the story of life. I understand the point that you're interpreting it is trying to make. However, according to the story of Job, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it not God's hand that this happens to Job? Isn't it that like whether it's used as a figure of speech or not, it is at God's hand that Job goes through all this suffering. Is it not?
Well, I mean, in the interest of never saying never, I'd say consider that point. I think a more accurate point, if you read the whole thing, somewhere after, like, I may get this wrong. I'm pretty sure it's like 36 or 42 chapters into the story of Job. Basically, the huge lesson, for me at least, I'm sure there's plenty of lessons you can get out of it, but I think the overarching one, you know, in the big picture realm, not just pertaining to Job and his family, is Job doesn't know everything. So, right, like the whole story, Job's friends are accusing him of sinning, right? And they're saying, there's no way this is happening because you're good. They're like, you must have sinned. That's why it's happening. And Job, of course, he knows he didn't do anything wrong. So this whole story, his friends are accusing him of sinning. Job is accusing God of picking on him for no reason. And then, like 40 chapters later, God shows up in empirical fashion, like a whirlwind of fire that's speaking to him. So metaphor, literal, whatever, you decide. But you know, in this, God says, look, first of all, he addresses his friends and says, guys, you have no idea about my servant Job. You have no basis for saying the things you're saying. And then he leaves the friends and he says, Job, you're saying all this stuff and you are talking out of extreme ignorance. Like, you don't know anything about the world. You don't know anything about the cosmos. You don't know anything about creation. You don't know. He's pointing out just how little Job and his friends know. I do find it interesting that another point, the one thing God never says is you can't know him. So God makes a point to say, look, Job and all these people, you'll never know everything about the cosmos and the things I've created, but he never says you can't know him. And I think that's really interesting because when Jesus shows up, it's all about he wants you to know him. God wants you to know him. So we may not understand everything about the things God made or the creation or the good and the bad and the ugly, But if we know the one that did all this stuff and we believe he's got our best interests at heart, and we get the sense that there's really good and bad things fighting and warring, and sometimes we're just collateral damage, I think that is a picture of the Bible. So rather than asking why or about the things God made, let's go to the source, because that's the thing we can know.
Well,
I'm done preaching.
Before we go on, guys, we got 12
sorry.
minutes left. Hold on, real quick.
Yeah.
We got 12 minutes left, and Nate, I know we've gone around enough, but maybe there's a few other new people that just joined us that would like to say something before we end, and then, there's always the after show that we can hash out the rest of this. So
sure, I want X to finish, and then we'll bring in whoever else wants to speak. X, what were you saying?
Yeah, how on like the terms you were laying out there, how do you know whose eggs to put your basket in at that point? And it's almost like you're saying go to the source, but if the source is the one telling me I'm all good, I don't lie, things like that, how am I judging to put my eggs in a basket?
Well, for me, I'd say for someone that has no spiritual sense whatsoever, then great analogy. You're just picking eggs and hoping you pick the right one and hoping it's not Loki who's tricking you. But I think for people who do what Jesus of the Bible says and seek him out honestly, earnestly, sincerely, and they find him, then they're like, oh, I invoke the name of Jesus, and lo and behold, now it's like this whole spiritual sense. It's like my eyes have been opened, and I really feel like this affirmation, confirmation that Jesus of the Bible, not only because I just invoked his name and that's the guy I've been seeking, but he answers. So I think, this is where you can get logic real quick and be like, if I pray to Jesus and I get a spiritual connection, how do I know it's not the devil? Well, I mean, in all probability, probably the thing you invoke the name of, and then you get a response, I'd say reason would dictate that's the one you give credit to.
It's the constant use of if that really gets me to they bury themselves. If I constantly pray to Jesus, and if I do this, and if Jesus exists, and if God exists, and if this, and if that, it's just a never-ending stream of ifs. Nothing, they can be certain of absolutely nothing. It's all pretty iffy.
But yeah, who else did you have in mind, Roy? Was Scott or Mark or whoever wanted to say anything? I wasn't watching chat to see, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just speaking generally. I wasn't watching chat either. I just wanted to let everybody know we're in the last 10 minutes. And so those who haven't spoken yet or what have you, please go ahead. We'd like to hear from all of you.
Yeah, don't let us dominate.
I'm challenged by it. The only thing I was saying is I could go to every single person's point in here. I mean, Fiona's is the first one that came up in terms of just wanted to clarify, thou shalt not commit murder, not thou shalt not kill. In terms of my belief is God does have an objective approach to morality and is definitely, in some cases, absolute in that he knows all, and from coming from a place of all, he can choose to be absolute, he can choose to be objective. We get a sense from his teachings that he is objective. He gives us numerous chances, and whether we decide to finally go with it or not, at some point he does bring an end to turmoil. He gives us numerous choices so that he doesn't have to go to the extremes or opportunities, I should call them.
Well, you
go on every single one, but you specifically, I think Saka brought up genocide. I wouldn't call it genocide. We have a lot of sinning groups of people throughout the Bible who had numerous chances, and at some point he creates a flood and gets rid of them all, or he does some other means to stop sin.
Okay, wait a second. So you believe that it's okay for God to ordain or allow genocide if it gets rid of sin?
Say that one more time. I was reading something.
You believe that it's okay for God to condone or ordain even genocide if it's getting rid of sin?
It's the term genocide that I'm hovering against, and so
Sorry,
I don't know.
do you believe that it's okay for God to kill a large race of people because he views them as sinful?
To get rid of, absolutely, that's God's decision.
Okay, do you believe that the rejection of Jesus is a sin?
I do.
So you are okay with the Holocaust?
I wouldn't jump to that level.
Of course not.
Well, I'm just
Hold on,
saying.
that's
I mean,
not-
this is
I have
it's a genocide.
Hold on a second. I have no evidence that shows that God, and it seems like it was not the case that God asked for that to happen, that
But-
God ordained it.
No, I mean, regardless, you're okay with genocide if the people are sinful, regardless of whether God ordained it or not.
I did not.
Your opinion is that the rejection.
Well, hey, Sokka, in all fairness, you're a little more testy than usual. I think we're falling into the thing we always want to avoid, where you kind of lead her down a line, and based on her answer, you then, she's sitting here like really trying to explain herself, but rather than allowing her to explain, we're kind of hammering home a point.
Right. No, sorry. Maybe I should just go back to the basic question I had here first off.
I object to the term genocide, and I have no clue whether God ordained it or not. And so that's where I stand with it. So I don't know how we can jump to that conclusion.
The conclusion is that inside the Bible, there's a story of there are stories of genocide. Now, one of the apologetic routes to kind of condone those actions, because they're a violation of the whole, thou shalt not kill thing, is the fact that those people were sinners in the first place. So you are okay with genocide. You're okay with murder if it goes against people that sin. Because that's what you're saying from that passage in the Bible, is that you have no grounds to question the actions or that God might have ordained for this stuff, because there was this this environment of sin in there for those people to be killed. So if you're okay with genocide as long as it's against sinners, well, depending on what your definition of sin is, people that reject Jesus, such as the Jewish people, are sinners. So how would you ever have any type of moral ground now to say that killing the Jews in the Holocaust was wrong?
I'd love to answer.
Go for it. But I'm just trying to bring up this point that this again, I think it's this misuse of objective and what she's interpreting objective morality to be.
I'll probably have to have the last word. So if you want to give an answer, go ahead, and then I'll probably finish off because we're getting about out of time.
We'll have it after. It's fine.
Okay. Well, I'd say again, just going by, this is not interpretation. This is stuff that's actually in the Bible. What I'm about to say, I'm paraphrasing. So if you really care, I can cite later. But first of all, we're told this is the devil's world, right? Like the Bible makes it very clear in a lot of ways that this is not God's property. It's Satan's. So also in the Old Testament, it talks a lot about preparing the way for the Messiah, right? For Jesus, Christians believe. So quickly, this is just one explanation. Take it or leave it. I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. I'm just saying this is what I think is true. That from the Garden of Eden, right? As quick as I can. So the serpent shows up, tricks the people, they eat the apple, and basically it makes a point in Genesis 3, I believe. It says, God's going to use these very people that the devil thought he tricked, and he's going to bring about the Savior of the world through their line. So why God didn't just snap his fingers and be like, God card, I win, great question. I like to think, my opinion, that he's like, I'm going to beat the devil at his own game. So he thought he was so clever in tricking these people and getting them to do what they weren't supposed to do, and screwed the world because of it, and now he's the owner. But, I think God's like, well, I'm going to beat him in his own game. So rather than snapping my fingers and magically playing the I win card, I'm going to send the Savior of the world through Adam's lineage all the way through, carry down through the Jewish people, the Israelite people, up until Jesus' birth. So the best example, you can forget all the other genocides that you're talking about, and we can just talk about the global flood, right? So for a second, those who don't think it's literal, whatever, just go with me. Let's act like it's completely literal. It literally killed everyone on earth except for like the 8 people that God saved, right? So if the narrative of the Bible is truly to be believed, then this world is like the most wicked place that we've never known. It is just described as the most evil thing. So what would have happened if this didn't happen? Maybe there's a better way. You can talk about that after the hangout. But I think the accurate thing is, if Jesus is really going through this line of these Israelite people, and the world around them is so wicked that there's only 8 of them who God considers like, oh, well, these people are good, they're aligning themselves with my will, then what would have happened if the rest of the world would have killed, converted, done something to interrupt these 8 people who were good? Then there would be no Savior of the world. Then God may have to magically snap his fingers. But if he knows the end from the beginning, I think this was part of his plan. So
I got to jump in here. I don't see how any world before Noah could have been any worse than the world we live in right now with the history that we have? What is it that those people killed by God in the flood of Noah, what did they do to deserve a death by drowning? Everybody. All the animals, all the women, all the children, all the seniors, all the babies, all the toddlers, all the children, everybody. Death, 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 glug, 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 drown, 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 drown. What did they do? I cannot conceive of a world that could be any worse than the one we live in terms of the behavior of people, many people. I just don't. You gotta. It's gonna take some explaining to me as to how these people lived that they deserve to be drowned before Noah's Ark, and the people today, throughout history, nasty, nasty, nasty people. There's going to be no flood again since the last flood. But the people, we didn't learn a lesson. We just became as bad or worse. But God said, no, there's going to be no flood. In the Bible, He said that I will promise you there's going to be no more floods, the rainbow and all that nonsense. So it just makes the whole God story even more preposterous. Here we are thinking that, oh my God, these people before Noah, they committed such abominations that they had to be killed. And we take it as, yeah, okay, well, it's in the Bible, they had to be killed. Now, we can ask, what abominations are people committing today? What have they been committing for the last 2,000 years? The last 6,000 years? Right? Since history's been recorded, people have been brutally, callously killing each other. No flood. I mean, the Holocaust came and went. As we know, nobody could be more brutal than that to each other prior to Noah's flood. If there was, if this is what the reason for the flood was, is because of the abominations that were caused by a Hitler-like society. Maybe everybody was Hitler. Okay, got it. But then we get Hitler here on Earth. So what have we learned from this quote-unquote fake flood, or fake flood without the quote-unquote? Nothing, obviously. It just makes it, like I say, it just makes the whole story more preposterous and illogical.
Even if this will make sense in a minute. So even at the expense of killing everyone on Earth, like 2 Peter 19 or 2:19 or something makes a reference that even the people who were killed by the flood, Jesus went back and preached to them. So if we're looking in small picture from our perspective,
what? Even the people who were killed by the flood, Jesus went back and preached to them. Did you hear what he said? I'm going to repeat just to make sure that I got this right and I'm not hearing things. Jesus went back and preached to the people who were around before the flood. I did hear that correctly, right? Nate, you're full of it.
I think God could have done his job better. If we're looking at a big picture, like if something would have happened and these 8 people were somehow corrupted, killed, something like that, then Jesus never even would have showed up, not only screwing us, but everyone before and after us. So if that's truly what happened and Jesus was able to go back and tell these people after their life ended and like, hey, by the way, you can win at life. Look, I'm the Savior. You believe me? I know you're not on this physical earth anymore, but now you're in eternity. So why wouldn't you? So I think there's a lot more. I hope.
Nate, you just dug yourself a big hole there. You can win at life. Is that what you just said? You can win at life. You can win at life by dying, and then getting eternal life. This is it. This is your promise. Do you yourself, Nate Cunningham, really believe that you're gonna die and eternal death will be replaced by some kind of eternal life after you are dead? Nate, you can't really believe this. I fear for our species if you really, really believe it. So please come clean and tell me that you're just trolling. Please say you're trolling.
If that made sense. I don't have a lot more time, but do you kind of see where I'm going? That even if something appears evil or whatever, if it would have been at the expense of not flooding the earth, then all 108 billion souls to have ever been estimated to live would be eternally screwed, versus kill a couple billion, save a couple billion. Because of that, the very same billion you killed, you're given the opportunity to save in this eternal spiritual sense. I know that was a lot.
Yeah. Just real quick, just rebuttal to that point then, and this is my problem when people when you come from the theological view of objective morality, is from your own admission then at that point in time, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the only now gauge of objective morality you have would also be based on omniscience, is that unless you knew what the greater good was, what the end result of anything will be, that you do not know how to rate anything as being objectively good in the mind of God unless you possess the same omniscience that God does. That you'd have to trust that all actions that are happening on earth are somehow happening for the greater good. So the example that I used when I had this discussion with Veckel, if someone was to break into your house and shoot you in the head right now, you might think it's wrong. You might think that what he did might have done is a sin. But if that was God's will, you have no ground now, no foundation to say that it was an objectively morally wrong for them to do it, because you'd have to know that what the great picture, what the grand scheme is, in order for you to get a full justification over whether something is right or wrong.
Well, there's truth there. Quickly, I forgot to finish the other part of that story. So, I was talking kind of BC. But as far as the Holocaust answer, we're kind of, I was giving the setup and I lost the plot. So anyways, we're quickly on the other side of that, right? After Jesus shows up, he's crucified, dead, we believe rose again. Then it's not so much justice. Heads aren't rolling near as much anymore because, justice was served pretty darn immediately when things went south before Jesus. After Jesus, there's still pending judgment, but for those who put their faith in Christ, it's taken care of. That's why there's not these, the stories in the New Testament like there are in the Old Testament. It's a lot more mellow, and I think judgment is still going to happen. It's just pending. But as far as the Holocaust and, that's sanctioned by God or something, first of all, like what I said earlier, I don't think everything happens for the greater glory of God. I think maybe in an ultimate eternal sense, God's going to win, but I think we have these parameters in this earth, this universe, whatever, that we can play in. So I think God's perfect ideal is not always carried out. This is clearly, per the Bible, the devil's world. There's all kinds of evil crap that is directly going against God's will, but why ever he's not forcefully, enforcing this, first of all, it's not his world, so I don't know what that looks like. But one more thing, in 2 Peter, it talks about how God's not wishing that anyone perishes. He's wishing that every single person comes to the knowledge and repentance and follows God. So if this is truly God's wish and God's hope that we all come to repentance, there is no way he would kill people before they have a chance. So as far as your Holocaust and whatever you were talking about, I think that's so inconsistent with Scripture. There's no way, if a God really wants people to recognize him, come to repentance, and align with God, that he would end their life prematurely. I think there's lots of great explanations like, well, this is the devil's world. Hitler is not a good guy. I think most of history is kind of in agreement with that. At least that Hitler is not a good guy and not enacting God's will. He may have certainly said he did or certainly thought he did, but look at David Koresh. He made the claim that he was God. So that didn't turn out well, and David Koresh was not God. Or I simply lack a belief that David Koresh was God. Anyways, guys, we do have to end there. Thanks so much. This has been a really good discussion. Yeah, sometimes it's hit or miss, but thanks. This is really good. Thanks, Becky and Fiona. You guys were awesome for the first hour, and you're still awesome. but thanks, Mark, for joining, and everyone that talked in the discussion.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm just sorry I was so late with me being not well.
Yeah, I hope you feel better. Did you get my message about take some saltine crackers and 7-Up? That does the trick.
I hope you feel
for
better
me.
for you.
Well, I don't think I could.
Well, hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for being on the panel. If you want to join in the future, Tuesdays 5 p.m. Eastern, Sundays 11 p.m. Eastern. You can go to natecunningham.org/guest. That's where I will post the link shortly before we start the hangout. Till next time, and whoever's on the panel, you guys can go ahead and hang out and talk as long as you want. I'm just ending the live part now, so thanks so much.
And so it ends. I thought that went very well. I like that. That's an example of what Google Plus Hangouts was like 10 years ago, and this went on for at least half a decade, and before it all came to a crashing end. And I would love to revive the Hangouts community again, because they were great people. We had great discussions. We know, and now we know a lot more. We have better arguments. We can actually take positions now that a lot of people didn't really take before because they didn't really know as much or understand as much, but now they do. So I think this is a good way to approach the crushing of Christianity, is to actually watch the Christians present their argument, and you can just watch them all just fall absolutely flat. And we're going to be doing this, I think, for the next quarter, throughout the winter into the spring. I'll be reacting to quite a few Nate Cunningham videos, because he unknowingly, Nate, you actually disprove all your own claims. And also, I don't know if you're unknowingly or knowingly, but you make a lot of crazy assertions that I have no idea where you think they come from and why you think we'd believe them. But that is for another day and another episode. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. And that's pretty much all I have. It is now January the 25th of 2022. This broadcast started on January the 24th of 2022. Good night. Good luck. Be well. Be healthy. Be safe. Bye-bye.